Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our official side event at the SE for All Global Forum, Empowerment and Equity, towards universal access to electricity by 2030 for Belize. I am Kayla Usher, Energy Officer at Belize's Ministry of Public Utilities, Energy Logistics, and E-Governance, MPUL. It is an honor to serve as your mistress of ceremony for this session. As the only female engineer at the Energy Unit, I take great pride in being part of this important conversation on energy access, equity, and innovation for Belize and our Caribbean neighbors. Belize has made significant strides in expanding electricity access, particularly through mini-grid solutions and policy-driven national electrification efforts. However, 22 villages in Belize remain without electricity, and our mission is clear: universal access to electricity by 2030. Today, we come together as leaders, experts, investors, and stakeholders to share experiences, explore innovative solutions, and strengthen partnerships that will drive electrification forward. This event is proudly hosted by Belize's Ministry of Energy, with the support of the Light Up Belize Technical Assistance Project and funding from the European Union in Belize. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge our distinguished guests. Mr. Zay Alvarez Pereira, Manager of the Energy Program for the European Union Delegation in Belize. Mr. Kyle Farnham, Manager, Energy Solutions for the European Union Barbados. Mr. Glyn Morris, Team Leader, Light Up Belize Technical Assistance Project. Our esteemed colleagues from the Ministry of Energy in Belize, Mr. Dion Kelly and Mr. Amin Matar. From the regulator, the Public Utilities Commission, Mr. Darvin Roberts. From the utility, Belize Electricity Limited, BEL, Mr. Deshaun Garbut and Ms. Danielle Jones. From IRENA, Mr. Gurbus Gonul, the Director of Country Engagement and Partnerships. From the European Union Green Deal Partnership, Mr. Luca Trincheri. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And from GIZ for the Euroclima program, Ms. Kimisha Thomas. We also welcome our distinguished guests representing the CARICOM Secretariat, CARILEC, GIZ, TTA, the Caribbean Development Bank, the Rocky Mountain Institute, the International Monetary Fund, and the Energy Alliance for People and Planet. Thank you all for joining us in this crucial discussion on advancing energy equity and sustainability. So why are we here? Energy is about empowerment, economic growth, and equity. We wish to present a synopsis of Belize's progress, looking at what we have done to date, including the expansion of mini-grids and national electrification projects, which would highlight the implementation of the EU-funded solar-powered mini-grids. We also want to mention the development of our national strategy for universal access to electricity by 2030, which is all wrapped up in our least-cost rural electrification strategy that is going to be released very soon. Together, we can explore the role of mini-grids in Belize's electrification strategy and identify synergies for adoption in our sister Caribbean nations. We can look at the national energy policy and planning for sustainable access, including perspectives from IRENA that's related to the planning and maintenance strategies for mini-grids in small island developing states. We also want to look at the implementation of these EU-funded mini-grid projects, included insights from GIZ's Euroclima program and the EU's investment in solar mini-grid within the region. And lastly, to explore institutional considerations for long-term sustainability. We are grateful for your attendance here today and value your contribution. You are key to achieving today's objective. Our goals include sharing knowledge on best practices for energy access, strengthening partnerships with regional and international stakeholders. And lastly, we want to identify funding and technical collaboration opportunities. So to open today's session is Mr. Z. Mr. Z Alvarez Pereira is the manager of the European Union program, the energy program, for the European Union delegation in Belize. He has over 25 years of experience in renewable energy policy and has led large-scale wind and solar energy projects in the Caribbean. He is currently overseeing solar-powered mini-grid implementation in Belize. Ladies and gentlemen, help me to welcome Mr. Z.
Good afternoon to you in the room and to the ones following online. Hola, mamá. Energy. Energy is what plants and we eat, and the outlet where you plug your phone. It all comes to a small number of elements from the periodic table, O2, H2, becoming part of larger molecules, some more complex than others. So simple, and yet it is still cumbersome to manipulate energy. One day it's going to be much easier. Yes, we just can't live without energy, and each day we use more energy than yesterday. That is totally fine, as long as you have a sustainable energy supply, and more importantly, as long as you have energy. Many people don't. And you don't have to go that far in the Caribbean to see it. Guyana, Suriname, and Belize are nations where the national utility does not cover the full territory. In the African continent, same situation in remote areas. Belize is the size of Belgium, and yet only 400,000 people. In the south, there are people descendant from the Mayas that were globalized, but still don't have a meter from the grid. Some have a few solar panels or a noisy generator, but there is no utility service. This is what we call universal access to energy, SDG 7. And that's something that governments like to pledge, sustainable energy for all. The story with mini-grids ongoing in Belize started 15 years ago, but lessons learned take time to be absorbed. Finally, we came now to a point where standards for mini-grids are necessary. The mini-grid industry is an emergent industry in Belize, albeit ephemeral, though necessary right now. Call it a transition step till the grid gets there. We are going to hear about an European Union-funded project being implemented by the Electrical National Utility, BEL. I'm looking forward to hearing today from Irina and about Euroclima 2 by our colleagues from GIZ. And lastly but not least, Luca Trinchieri, team leader at the European Union Barbados delegation, will speak about the EU Global Gateway. Because we are going to ask for funding for future projects, the Global Gateway is one of the possible solutions, together with international financial institutions such as the European Investment Bank, the IDB, the Caribbean Development Bank, and so forth. So I wish you all an interesting official side event in preparation for tomorrow's Sustainable Energy Forum 2025. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Z, for welcoming us. I now wish to reference our agenda for today. We start our first segment looking at the energy access and role of mini-grids in Belize. And we have Mr. Glenn Morris, team leader of Light Up Belize Project Technical Assistance. He has over 30 years of experience in energy efficiency and renewable energy. He has implemented the national and regional electrification projects across small island developing states. Mr. Morris is known for his technical expertise and passion for energy efficiency policy development. Mr. Glenn?
Wow, very bright lights. I can hardly see you, but I'm very glad to see you here this afternoon. And I want to welcome you also and say that I hope that we can have a productive afternoon learning about electrification activities, energy access activities in Belize. But I think more importantly, thinking about how we can work together to go forward and to try and realize some of these objectives and the leadership that has already been shown in Belize. So what I would do quickly is to make a few slides about really the Light Up Belize project, just that you have that context and understanding of how we end up here today and what you could anticipate going forward. And so, I have a clicker. So let me move forward and say, we talk a little bit about the Light Up Belize Technical Assistance Project, talk a little bit about energy access, then think about the programmatic approach that we have adopted in Belize as a partnership with national stakeholders, and then look at some of the key outputs of the activities under the Light Up Belize project, and then with some reflections that I can offer that can perhaps stimulate some discussion later. And there we go. So this is a complex, maybe graphic, just to give an overall picture of the Light Up Belize project, which, as you would have heard from Mr. Zay, is an EU-funded technical assistance project that is formulated and implemented under a financing agreement that has other components. One of those other components was a grant from the EU, signed in a grant agreement with the utility in Belize, BEL, Belize Electricity Limited, and the technical assistance project, Light Up Belize, was in place to support BEL and other partners in implementing mini-grid activities with the grant that came in parallel with the technical assistance project. And on the left, you see in orange the 5 components of the Light Up Belize project, which is quite a broad scope and a broad range of activities that looked really at supporting the energy transition in Belize, but with an emphasis on energy access, referencing back to the grant that was made available to BEL. And so you see management activities, capacity building activities, energy governance activities, energy infrastructure for unserved households, this is the energy access component, and then feasibility studies, which we prepared that for further funding and further implementation. And on the right, you see the timeline of the project that started in November of 2020 in a very difficult time, which some of us might remember. And that COVID pandemic fortunately allowed us to work more flexibly towards the end of, or in the middle of 2021. 2022, it became easier. But it was a 4.5-year project, which ends, unfortunately, now at the end of April. So the project has largely completed all the activities under the terms of reference, and this event today is, to some extent, a closing bookmark for this 4.5-year project, which has been implemented in Belize. So now we could maybe just turn to the question of energy access, and we've already heard this afternoon about, and we know about the essential needs that energy services can provide, and how we are reliant on energy services. And so energy access is, the term that we use, the shorthand for addressing ways to meet energy service needs: cooking, lighting, refrigeration, productive uses, and so on. But really it is driven by this question of equity. And I want to use an example of the equity that I think highlights the importance of keeping this in mind. And and you would know this from energy and access and electrification projects worldwide, that very often the discussion would be, everyone will agree we should all have access to electricity, or energy access should be universal, but in terms of the commercial frameworks that we use for utility planning and operations and so on, even regulation, the argument would be, well, some customers are too expensive to serve with energy service needs from electricity. And you could immediately say, yes, well, that's apparently the case if you look at the financials from the perspective of the utility. And then the corollary is, or the follow-up is to say, if we were to extend the electricity to others, those who are unserved, this would require some more money, subsidy. People would talk about a subsidy. But I would argue it's in fact the other way around. That those unserved customers in let's say, Belize, but worldwide, are actually subsidizing those who already have electricity. So by virtue of the fact that not everybody has electricity, those that do are served with electricity that comes at a lower price, because the costs of serving everybody are hidden and really subsidized by those who don't have electricity. So this is in a way inverting this approach or this mindset, which unfortunately is driven from the financial perspective. But I think it's worth considering and saying, why are the unserved customers subsidizing those who do have access and therefore having a double disadvantage? No benefit of energy service from electricity and actually covering the costs, or let's say reducing the costs to those who do already have access. So it's just a way of thinking that this is, or approaching this to say it is of almost a human right to have access, and we have to look at this as a right, not as a commercial decision. I would move on to say that then, if one accepts that you're going to move forward with universal access to energy services, then one needs to have an integrated and an inclusive approach. I think we all agree on that. It should be outcome-oriented, so we are looking at the energy services. So we are looking at the cooking, the cooked meals, not the electricity that goes into the cooked meal, not the gas that goes in the cooker, but the cooked meals, and how to get that energy service delivered in the most cost-effective and sustainable manner. And then, very importantly, looking at roles and responsibilities to try and be clear about who does what to achieve these outcomes that we've identified in the interests of equity. And that we have spent some time in Belize looking at, and I think there are some lessons that can be learned from how the roles and responsibilities have been allocated in Belize. And of course, the final point is this energy services perspective you would have heard me talking about, to say we are looking at the service, the lighting, the cooked meals, the heated water, the productive outputs of a workshop. We are not interested in kilowatt hours. We are not interested in kilograms of gas or bundles of wood fuel. We are looking at this input-output, where the customer is only really interested in a cooked meal and not really worrying about how that cooked meal arrives, whether it's with electricity or whatever. So it's I think, a useful perspective to keep in mind. And then more specifically in Belize, that the Light Up Belize project was tasked under the scope of activities to look at supporting BEL, the utility, to implement 5 mini-grids that would serve around 600 customers. And this one could do this, but we took some time, and fortunately maybe the slow start to the project due to COVID gave us that opportunity to reflect on the value of a programmatic approach that has a national perspective, that we are looking at all unserved customers and then starting to think about how to approach this national requirement in a systematic and a methodical manner. And to do this, number 2, within a sort of a fit-for-purpose institutional framework. And I think we will hear more this afternoon that Belize is somehow unique in the world at least in my experience, whether it's in Southern Africa, East Africa, Afghanistan, where I've had some opportunity to work over the last 20 years, that Belize has one framework, regulatory framework for electricity service provision, electricity distribution. And so we have that benefit in Belize of just one tariff plan across the country, whether the electricity is coming from a mini-grid or the centralized grid. And the same customer service and the same regulatory oversight and the same standards for networks, for appliances, and so on. And this has a very valuable implication for countries that are stretched because of scale. And so this is something that often, at least I've not seen, discussed or highlighted, how smaller economies, smaller countries are saddled with very high overheads for the institutional frameworks that have been presented largely from the perspective of large-scale energy access programs. So Belize, you will hear later, has got a much less challenging objective, still a challenge, but it's done within this, let's say, more integrated and fit-for-purpose institutional arrangement. The third thing was to be very clear that when you're talking under this single national holistic electricity framework, that we are talking about apples for apples with the levels of service, so that the customer paying for electricity from the centralized grid, whether it's the social tariff or the household tariff, is getting the same level of service that they would get whether it's mini-grid or centralized network. And that again has benefits because it means that things are standardized and customers have an understanding of what it means to have access to electricity. Of course, the fourth point is the need for community engagement, and specifically in Belize, I gather, and I'm quite sure in Suriname, Guyana, and others where there are indigenous communities, there's this protocol called FPIC, the Free, Prior, and Informed Consent Protocol, to ensure that communities are fully informed with decisions that are made around infrastructure that is implemented on their land. And this is a big issue, is the land use arrangements for implementation of infrastructure. And I'm very glad to say it took a year of consultations that were not anticipated, but which I think in the end have given a very good basis and a very good understanding to the customers of how a project will be implemented and what the issues might be, and very importantly, how to address problems that will arise in the implementation and perhaps the operation. And lastly, an incremental learning approach. So to try and reflect and to bring learnings back into the process so that there can be a good and progressive feedback, progress. So the outputs I will run through very quickly from the Light Up Belize policy project was the policy. A national policy was developed to update the first national energy policy in the CARICOM member states from 2011, 2012, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And so there's a new national energy policy that was published in November last year as a consequence of, I think, 3 policy workshops with stakeholders and quite a sustained program over 18 months. That policy has, as policy objective number 3, universal access to electricity by 2030. So that establishes the mandate in a way, and it supports us being here today and to look forward and look ahead towards meeting that policy objective. Of course, we supported the grant agreement that was signed between BEL and EU. We supported the activities to do surveys of the unserved villages in Belize so that we could have this national perspective of what is the overall challenge, and then how to think about selecting villages that might be prioritized or might be included under the grant, which of course didn't cover all the unserved villages. And so that was a whole process to get there. We ran an energy access workshop, and we helped and supported the national energy reports. And then more operationally looking at the support for 8 procurement packages under the grant, that BEL could procure materials, services, and works construct these mini-grids. And that is in progress. You will hear more later. And part of that was engineering design and procurement of 2 mini-grid generation and storage facilities. I'm very glad to invite or recognize Unai from the company TTA, a European company from Barcelona, that were responsible for the design of those mini-grids, generation and storage packages. And then, just to conclude, some reflections. And I think the important things to highlight would be, firstly, that energy access programs are complex and difficult. I think we have seen this, we know this, but they are possible. Just because they are difficult doesn't mean that one should not attempt it and that it's not worthwhile. And I think they become easier as one engages in the challenge and learns from that challenge. And I think Belize is showing that. And so I think we will hear more later. Secondly, I think this point of efficiency, sort of overheads for implementation, and the critical mass in terms of the energy around implementing projects is important. And this comes back to the point that I raised about how difficult it is in small economies or smaller economies to have the human resources and the financial resources to do all the things that any country has to do in terms of regulation and operation and so on of electricity and energy access. And so it places very high demands on smaller economies which do not have the people and do not have the resources to provide those same services that you would expect and are needed in much bigger economies. And so I think it's worthwhile to bear that in mind, that it comes back to the fit-for-purpose regulatory framework. Thirdly, that momentum and continuity are critical, and I think Belize is at that point where there's some momentum built up based on experience, again, that you will hear about. But the question is how to continue and not to lose the momentum now, so that the job can be finished by 2030. And lastly, I raise this point of affirming experience, where I think the learning by doing and the reflection about what was achieved, and that we, as a partnership, have jointly achieved some things, significant things, which I think have advanced the energy access agenda in Belize. But it's important to recognize it and have that affirming experience to say, we really did that. Of course, the job is not over, but we can move forward with more confidence because we faced difficult challenges 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and we have made good progress. And then some links and resources. I won't dwell on these, but they're available to you when you get the presentations. It's simply some documents and access to the photo library of the project. And then I would say thank you very much. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Glynn, for so vividly outlining the projects, initiatives, and the outputs of those initiatives. Who better than the 3 institutions at the core of Belize's energy sector to come all the way to Barbados and set the scene for you? The ministry, the regulator, and the utility, all here to outline our plan for universal access to electricity. Firstly, I want to welcome from the ministry, Mr. Dion Kelly. He's an electrical engineer focused on energy justice and equitable access. He leads efforts to bridge urban-rural energy gaps in Belize. Mr. Kelly?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here at the Sea4All Forum, and even more so to be in Barbados. There's a level of comfort you have walking in a street that you have never been before, and you feel very safe. So I really enjoy the vibe in the street here in Barbados, so I'm grateful to be here. So as my colleague, Ms. Gabriel, rightfully said, that we really need to set the scene for you guys to understand where we have started in terms of energy access, where we are currently, and where we plan to go. And so we're grateful to have you here. So we see that energy access we're delivering universal electrical services by 2030. Of course, we know it's a SDG 7 goal, and Belize has adopted that as the rest of the world, and we believe that we're moving steadily. So I could put a synopsis on my presentation in terms of 3 points. We want to look at Belize's energy context and policy framework. Also, we want to look at microgrids installation in Belize and opportunities for progress. So, to set the scene, can you imagine being a child in a rural area that don't have electricity? You go to school, you go home, and if you don't try to get your homework done before it gets dark, you probably have to use a candle, damaging your eye. It's polluting your system, your house as well. Also, being a mother, trying to prepare food in the afternoon, and if you don't finish in time, by the time the sun goes down, you probably have to use a candle as well, and you have to try to hurry and get that meal done. And even when you prepare that meal, you either have to find a way to preserve that meal into the next day, or eat all that meal at the same time, or at worst case scenario, you throw it away. And being a farmer, because the majority of the villages in Belize that don't have access to electricity, they are subsistence farmers, meaning they just normally farm to provide food for themselves. And of course, there's sometimes the barter system or even selling, but at a very minute scale. So understanding why microgrids are needed is very important. So to open up your appetite a bit, I think it's very good to get into some data sets in Belize, whereby we see just about 84.8% of the total energy, and I must say energy supplied within country, is from renewable energy. We have the breakdown there in terms of bagasse, hydro, firewood, and solar. And I think what is very important there to highlight, you notice our solar capacity is just about 0.4%. So we haven't really tapped into it, and that's good news for the country going forward. We could say that this point right here is the elephant in the room, whereby on a yearly basis, we would probably import 40 to 50% of our electricity used in country from Mexico. And so that's not a bad situation, but of course it's something we'd want to improve on and leverage, and I'll explain that as we go along. And so understanding that's the situation, but what is the trend? We see that in 2023, the energy imports increased by 1,000 terajoules, right? And so we know that the demand is going up, and we're getting it from imports, right? And so that is a situation we need to fix as we go forward. And in Belize, we actually found out, I think in 2005, that we had crude oil. So since 2005 to present, we're still extracting crude oil. The majority in the initial stages were being exported, but now the majority stays within country, and we'll see a graph about that in a moment. And so we see the urgency for diversification is there because we're importing our local products is going down. So we need to see how we manipulate as we move forward, and we see that microgrids and decentralized renewable energy are very critical to support. Of course, the utility scale systems will be leading, but how do you bridge that gap in terms of resilience and support to the grid? And we see microgrids and decentralized systems playing a big role going into the future. So I always like graphics, you know, because a lot of words, you get a graphic that sticks in your mind. And so when we break down the total energy supply within Belize, and this is for 2023 data, every year we produce an energy report, and this is directly from that report. And so we see that just about over 17,000 terajoules is within the total energy supply mix, and we see that's a combination of indigenous production, imports, and also energy trade. And as we said earlier, the renewable energy component is about 84% of local production, and the fossil fuel, as I said, it's dwindling down. It used to be very higher. And of course, the elephant in the room, and you can say two elephant if we want to look at it that way, because 50% of all energy used in Belize is fossil fuel, and that goes directly into the transport sector, and I think it's similar for other Caribbean countries. So I think you guys have a concept of that elephant in the room I'm talking about. And we also import electricity from Mexico. As I said, it's not a bad thing, but leveraging it is the best way to go. And of course, the energy trade in terms of the exports and the bunker fuel. So we just want to break it down further. These two graphs just pretty much shows on the left the production within country, on the right the imports. So what's important here and glaring to us is that when we look at the black portion of the graph, that's imported electricity from Mexico, and we can see that if nothing else is clear, electricity demand is going up. What is also clear to those who know the graph and understand what is there is that the blue portion is the hydro, and we know when it comes to Belize electricity production, it's predominantly, the renewable energy portion is predominantly hydro, and then biomass, and so the biomass is the green portion. We can see in the year 2020 and 2022, there was what we would call a positive side to our energy mix, whereby hydro actually took out some of that importation that we would have done from Mexico. But in the other 2 years, 2021 and 2023, it was the opposite, which pretty much was more or less of a dry year. So we know that once climate change is not favorable to us, our renewable energy supply takes a dip on the importation side, but that's something we hope to fix with our current projects that we are looking at in terms of 60 megawatts of solar, 40 megawatts of battery, probably within the next 2 to 3 years. So also the cost of power is important. We know that we get a good majority of our power on a good year. I must speak on a good year in terms of good rain, bagasse from the sugar mills. We have 2 sugar mills that also produce electricity. And so we see some pricing here across the years of 2020 to 2023. We see that solar that we haven't really tapped into is probably the cheapest source. And then it's right behind by electricity imports. Now, looking at the electricity imports, you might say, wow, that's real good, but that's when you look at it at a cumulative type figure. If you look at it from a day to day or a month to month, there are certain times when it's very expensive and other times when it's very cheap, and that's why installing that 40 megawatts of battery energy arbitrage could be a very important point going into the future for energy matrix. And then we see after that, it's the combined heat and power, which is the bagasse plants from sugar mills, and then hydro, and then a bright spot for us is that the non-renewable thermal, which is fluctuating and very high in terms of cost, we don't really use it as much except for emergency and peak shaving. And of course, it's always good to look at your energy intensity. I believe that before you think about any type of generation, you need to understand how to reduce your consumption, so the cost to your new generation set will be less. And so we know that when we look at energy intensity, it's definitely because of the transport sector, but of course, the building sector also needs to be looked at as well. So why are we here today? Why are we using microgrids? As we can see from the Statistical Institute of Belize in 2023, they're pretty much saying that 5% of all houses in Belize don't have access to electricity. And so, you know, that last mile are villages, and you'll see when it comes to the EU project that we're doing exactly where these villages are. So we know that the electricity reality is that in urban areas, more than likely you'll have access. But we do know that within the urban areas, there are peri-urban areas that don't have. And so when I get into the electrification strategy that my colleague, Ms. Gable, spoke about, we'll explain that more or less how we move forward in terms of those areas. But microgrids, why? As Mr. Glenn rightly stated, that when the utility looks at the financial model to understand if they would move forward with connecting a certain village, especially at the far end of the country, they see it's not financially feasible, and thus microgrids and decentralized systems are very important. So, as Mr. Glenn rightly stated earlier, that we created an energy policy in 2011, and then by 2023, we updated that policy. And it's very important to note that fact. It wasn't thrown out, the 2011 policy, but it was updated. And so it's very important. As we look at some of the objectives, we see diversification is important, enhance energy efficiency, improve energy access, and align with the NDCs. We believe it's very important that we align with the NDCs because ideally, no matter how small your country is, it's very important that you play a role in the global village because everybody has a very important role to play. And so some of the strategy actions would be to develop policies. Even though we have the national energy policy, we don't want to dive into probably an energy efficiency policy, an e-mobility policy. Those are items that ideally would support your generation mix. Strengthening capacity, we're hoping to create an Energy Act probably this year. And then that would allow us as the ministry to provide better service to the country, and of course, to also support the regulator as well. And promote public awareness. I think public awareness is very important because really and truly, you can do a lot of work as the regulator, as the utility, and if you don't get this information out to the public, then you're losing a good portion of what could be done for the country. So just to continue to look at the energy policy, we see universal access to energy is very important. Regulation for microgrid distribution. I think we have just through the regulator release two regulation, one looking at the licensing regime for generation, and so we have pretty much opened up that market, and also in terms of how the feed-in tariff will probably work for a generation that feeds back into the grid, which is two important part, which is complementary to the microgrids. Of course, indigenous energy resource development, that's very important, I think, for all countries. I think that's a goal. Technical assistance and legislative support for microgrid deployment. As Mr. Glenn stated, that we try to ensure that the national tariff is in line with the microgrid tariff, and so there's that level of confidence that these communities know that they're equal to the rest of the country. Of course, disaster resilience. We have seen what hurricanes can do to renewable energy systems, and so ideally that needs to be a part of our plan going forward. So where did we start? We started pretty much back in 2014. I think the La Grasa project was very key because it was a pilot project. We already knew as a ministry that it was technically possible to do microgrids to serve a village, but how about the financial side? And so there were like three options in terms of the financial side. Initially, we were saying that probably the village could run the system. We said probably that won't work because they probably didn't have the technical capability and even worse, the financial capacity to do so. And we also looked at the private sector, where we said that probably won't work as well because there might be a major subsidy that's required, or either the private company will charge a very high tariff to the customers. And so we got the utility to agree that they would operate and maintain the system, which I think has paid dividends so far. And so the pilot project had a lot of lessons learned, and we'll go over some of those as we move forward. And of course, the other project that we did, it's in Indian Creek. This plant actually supports 3 other villages, and I think there was a lot of lessons learned, as well as Mr. Glenn said, that when you move into the southern part of Belize, they are what you'd call the Maya land rights, and so through FPIC, and so there was a lot of lessons learned within this project. The latest one that we did was in last year, 2024, we inaugurated this system in Corazon Creek. This system was particularly special to the ministry because it actually serves a village that has a high school that serves about 15 villages within that area. So you can imagine how important having electricity at that high school is. So coming to the EDF 11 project, as Glenn was highlighting and Mr. Zia was highlighting, that it's a very important project. And as I said, to give you a context of exactly what we're talking about, that straight line is the borderline between Belize and Guatemala. So you know we're talking about the orifice, the edge of the country. And so the plan is to provide 5 villages under the project with electricity. This is one example where 2 villages will be supported by one grid. I won't get into much more because I think Mr. Glad already touched on it, but I do want to thank the European Union on behalf of the government of Belize because they were very flexible. 2 of the other villages, when we did the canvassing, we realized that the microgrids probably wouldn't serve the entire village. And when we say the entire village, we mean that ideally houses would have had electricity, but then farmers wouldn't have had, due to the size of the system and the reach that it could go in terms of the distribution system. And so we have changed the concept from microgrids to a line extension, and we believe that that village, as they are very dependent on farming and commercial farming at that in terms of potato and carrots, and so we believe that flexibility that the European Union had will pay dividends for those 2 villages. So what's important in terms of institutional arrangement within these projects? You can have a well-planned out and defined project, but if you don't have the players or the personalities to really understand their role, so we see that the ministry takes on a project coordination role along with the utility, but what's also important from the utility side, outside of operation and maintenance, is that we expect one day that these microgrids will be connected to a national grid, so the grid needs to be built to standard. Also, as Mr. Glenn stated, having a liaison through the Ministry in charge of rural transformation is important. and from the Ministry of Human Development, they are the ministry in charge of Indigenous Peoples Affairs. So Belize has a very well packed down institutional arrangement for microgrids implementation. So key lessons. I think I'll slow down a bit right on this slide because it's very important to understand what was learned throughout this past 12 years. You'd want to engage proposed operator and maintenance team of the system. We learned this because ideally, when you're building these grids, you need to understand after the turnkey, after the project is handed over, who operates, who maintains, who ensures that for the next 25 years this system will work and the funds invested are not wasted. Very important point. Connect homes and community spaces. As I stated earlier, in these villages, there are subsistence farmers, so they don't have that capital, upfront capital, to do all the home wiring and connection and paying for fees. And a project is a failure if you have electricity in the community and no one connects. So this is important. Some of these community spaces are used as hurricane shelters. You want to create a project team with clear responsibility. As I said, the institutional arrangement is key. Build a network to national grid standards. I think I already touched on that. Just in case the grid reached the microgrid, that microgrid can provide services to the national grid. Ensure training after installation. This is very important because some of these, as you saw with the map, that these villages are right on the border of Guatemala, and so they're a bit remote. So for the utility to always be out there, if there's even a minimal problem, it'd be good to have someone in the village trained. Coordinate building the grid and generation. We found this out in the Indian Creek project because ideally, managing expectation of the village is important. You do not want to have lines in front of somebody's house and the grid is not built. That's a major issue. And prioritize community engagement. I think I should have had this as the first point. Ideally, there were villages in Belize who did not want electricity because of religious reasons. And so you have to respect that and understand that. And so you match and you tailor-make your initiative to the community's needs. And of course, what Mr. Glenn highlighted, having that national tariff is very important. It makes the utility, the regulator job easier, and it gives that level of confidence to all persons who don't have electricity that they're equal to the rest of persons in the country. And so, to get to electrification strategy, under the support of the IDB, what we did, we used a georeferencing tool, pretty much and then we verify where the national grid was. And I think this was the part that was very tedious to actually sprinkle, to use that term. Because remember, we're extrapolating into 2030. Ideally, we want to know how many more households probably would be built, and they use national census data to actually extrapolate that, and that's why we see those figures there. In terms of the tree interventions, we see just about close to 4,000 households by 2030 might need isolated systems, that's standalone systems on the rooftops. Probably about 2,000 persons would be in communities that might need a mini grid and grid extension. And so there was a threshold within the analysis that stated that any household within 500 meters of a national grid, that would fall under grid densification, which is not taken under the strategy, but of course is something that the ministry will work along with the utility to get done. And so we see that when we look at our strategy, that was the analysis. What are the steps? First of all, stakeholder collaboration, which I think we already have well packed down. Creation of least cost electrification plan, that's the analysis. Create list of microgrids, that was done in the analysis. Support the electric utility to create a plan for line extension. Do remember that even though we're talking about microgrids today, there are certain communities that it would be more feasible to do the line extension. The analysis also showed that, and as my colleague, Ms. Gabriel, said, we're hoping to share that with you guys and the region as well. And so collaborate with NGO, because what we have seen is that when it comes to the standalone system, the NGOs are more better placed to work with these systems. And I just want to highlight these 4 villages because this is what you would call the next steps in terms of microgrids. With the support of the IDB also, we are doing the design for these systems. The figures that you see there are back of the envelope calculations that we have seen from other microgrids. So it could be off probably 5 or 10%. We figured once we get the design, we would have a better picture of the costs. And these are the next 4 villages we're hoping to electrify. So this is always my favorite slide in presentations. I want to highlight 4 points out of my presentation. First of all, microgrids are not new to Belize. It's very important to give that level of confidence to anybody who wants to partner with us. We have done it before, and we can do it in a very efficient manner. Belize has a least cost rural education strategy. And so we're hoping to use that to move forward. Also, Belize has a sound institutional arrangement. That's very important for you guys to understand that we know what we're doing, we know that we have the persons to do it. And lastly, very important, Belize is seeking partnership to continue its electrification programs. And so I thank you for your time. I hope I didn't go over 20 minutes. And so I think I can make a synopsis of my presentation just by saying energy justice is the key. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly, for really and truly putting together a nice scope of energy and electricity in Belize. I want to share with you that our ministry, also being responsible for digitization, we've shared with you in your packets that you would have received at registration the QR codes to access our annual energy report as well as the national energy policy. These are also available on the ministry's website. As well, these presentations from today will all be shared with you electronically, so you would have access to the information shared today. Thank you, Mr. Kelly. We now move on to the other segment, inviting the utility to speak to us about the implementation of these EU-funded mini-grid projects. We have representing Belize Electricity Limited, Mr. Deshaun Garbott. He's the project lead there at the utility, and he specializes in power systems and rural electrification. He's a key contributor to utility-led approaches for expanding electricity access. Please help me to welcome Mr. Garbott, please.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Ms. Kayla, for that introduction. Thank you, Dion, for that insight overview about the government plans to reach 100% energy access in Belize. So, as the government secure funding and put in place the necessary framework, the Belize Electricity Limited plays a key role to make these plans comes to life. So today I will be sharing on behalf of the Belize Electricity Limited the key role we play in order to reach this vision through the implementations of mini-grids. Before I jump into my presentation, I would just want to take this opportunity to share our company's mission. So we deliver safe, reliable, and sustainable energy solutions to enhance the quality of life and productivity of enterprises to support national development. So, going back to our 100% energy access target, before I proceed, I just want to show you where we are as a utility company in reaching all these unserved communities. So this is a map of our distribution network and unserved communities. As you can see, we have made significant progress in extending our grids, but we still have some community that remains unserved, as Dion and Kayla mentioned during their presentation. Currently, these communities that remain unserved is basically their remotely locations, and so the traditional line expansion might not be the best suitable solution to reach these communities, And we realized that with the implementation of mini grids, that would help us bridge this gap, right? So with the strong collaboration we have with the government, we were able to successfully implement 3 mini grids over the past 8 years, as Dion mentioned. Due to the strong collaboration, we might be repeating most of this stuff, but I will just quickly go through it. So we have the first one, La Gracia, which is in the western part of our country, and then we have 2, Indian Creek and Corazon Creek, which are in the southern part of our country. So I'll go a bit in details in terms of capacity and what these and the positive impacts these mini-grids have caused in our country. So La Gracia, it currently supplies 45 households, 1 school, and 2 churches. The capacity is 22 kilowatt solar PV, 24 kilowatt battery inverter, and a 22 kilowatt backup battery generator. Indian Creek, which is the largest one and which we have the most experience with, or I would say it also feeds 3 villages, over 400 households, multiple churches, and multiple schools. The capacity is 400 kilowatt peak solar, 200 kilowatt battery inverter, and 184 kilowatt backup generator. And lastly, Corazon Creek, which is the most recent one, currently supplies 50 households, 3 schools, and 3 churches. The capacity is 72 kilowatt solar PV, 36 kilowatt battery inverter, and 36 kilowatt backup generator. So as the utility company maintaining and operating these grids, we definitely learned some lessons. And this will take me to my next slide. So lesson learned from operating and maintaining these mini grids. So I will focus on 4 main lessons that we learned. So the first one is the levelized cost of electricity from a mini grid versus the utility, right? Currently, our rate, the utility electricity, our rate per kilowatt hours is way more lower than the levelized cost of a mini grid. So that's one challenge there we currently have. In terms of the operational and maintenance costs, we realize that there are 3 factors which influence this. It's the frequent travel for troubleshooting. The main reason for this is because these villages are located in remote areas, and having our guys go in there on a daily basis will definitely increase the operational and maintenance costs. Also, what we realize is systems with small battery capacities, the generator have to work more when the sun is not shining, and this takes up the fuel cost and also the operational costs, right? And also what we learn with these systems are in remote areas, so we want the complexity to be as minimal as possible. So, for example, Indian Creek, we believe that the energy management system is a bit too complex, which cause frequent trips to these mini grids, which in turn again takes up the costs for the operational and maintenance. Another lesson learned with these 3 mini grids is the limitation in commissioning. So this basically means that during the commissioning phase, where we have the implementers or the company who is in charge of doing commissioning, there were some limitations due to that. So customers, after the generation storage part is completed, customer cannot afford to connect to the grid. So the system the system was not tested, it was not under any real constraint. And then during that 1 year liability defect period, there not so much issues arise. Now, when it is handed over to the utility now, that is when customers are connected to the grid, and then the load increase, and that is when the system is put under constraint, and then most of these issues would happen under the utility while we were not basically prepared, because these issues did not happen during that time, right? So, and another lesson learned is that, okay, we have the customer connected to the grid, but now it's time for billing. So the billing and payment difficulties we have. So customer had trouble receiving their bills due to no mobile nor internet access, right? And our traditional way how we bill our customers is through, we need internet to do that, everything is digitalized. So, and another issue there is that there is no nearby collecting agents. So we find that customers complain about they have to travel very far to pay their bill, and the reason why we can't set up any collecting agent in these villages because there's no internet access in these villages. So these are just lessons learned as the implementers with dealing with these mini-grids, right? So because of all these lessons learned, we try to improve on different projects that we get through the assistance of the ministry. So currently, the ministry was able to secure funding for the electrification of 5 villages from the EU. I want to say thank you on behalf of the Belize Electricity Limited to EU. So the way this grant is handled is not the traditional way. So the agreement is between the electric company, right? So it's BL and the European Union who signed a grant, and we oversee the entire project. So we deal with all the procurement, we deal with the implementation, and we deal with commissioning, right? This way the utility have a fair opportunity to oversee all what is happening, and because at the end of the day, remember, as what Mr. Kelly mentioned, we are responsible to do the maintenance and operation of these plants. So we want to ensure that these systems are well built and resilient, so that we don't have much issues, because what we're seeing is that these, being that the rate, the levelized cost of these mini-grids is already higher than what we charges, we have to ensure from our part that we inherit very reliable systems, right? So in this agreement, the grant covers the house wiring, the service entrance, and the distribution network. So right after commissioning, the customers or the community would be able to connect to the grid immediately, which then in turn would have, it would be better for us when we are doing the commissioning, right? So in the north, we have 2 villages, which would be by the line extension, which Dion mentioned. And in the south, we have 3 villages, which would be supplied via mini-grid, right? 1 mini-grid, which would feed 1 village, and 2 mini-grid, which would feed the other one. So although we learn lessons after these existing mini-grids, while we're currently in the implementing phase of these mini-grids under the EU project, I just want to mention new lessons learned as we proceed with this project. So There are two main lessons. The FPIC, I believe both Dion and Glenn touched on it a bit. So the impacts, what it caused on the project is it required extensive consultation. It's because when we signed this grant agreement, yes, the FPIC was there, but it was not in law. Now, after the agreement was signed, it came into law. So we had to follow this FPIC requirements because it was by law, and if we don't follow it, the community could take us to court, right? So this required us to do extensive consultation with these villages. It basically took 1 year to do this consultation plan in order to have the village accept this project, right? So that basically delay this project 1 year. How was it addressed? We worked closely with the leaders and making multiple site visits and then just show them the benefit of the project for them to accept this project, right? One other lessons we learned, well, specifically with the EU, is that geographically where we are located, most of our suppliers are from non-eligible countries under the EU, right? So, for example, the US, USA, Mexico, we're very close to them, so most of our materials and equipment come from these countries, especially the materials for the distribution network. So basically it caused delay because then we had to request for multiple derogation, and how we address or how we plan to address this in the future is for proper planning, for us to foresee all these required derogations, and we create a smoother procurement process. Right? So I believe from the utility perspective, we are in a better situation, or we have more experience in how to deal with these mini-grids. So we have made some adjustments for future mini-grids. So for example, for the levelized cost of electricity of a mini-grid versus the levelized cost or tariff of the electricity, what we realize, what influenced that is the battery capacity and the solar capacity. So as the implementers, we emphasize that the battery capacity and solar capacity are well optimized. That way, it doesn't bring it down as low as the rate of the electricity, but it lowers it a bit. In terms of the operational and maintenance costs, so what we are currently doing with the Indian Creek mini-grid is that we are using a hybrid O&M approach, whereby we train the villagers as first responders, so it avoids having our guys go into the plant for every little things that occur at the plant. So that is working out that is working out really good, as within a year we save almost about $50,000 just by having the villagers responding to minor issues. We also emphasize that the energy management system for this plant be as simple as possible. What we experience is that sometimes it is something as simple as just an update to these EMS that cause downtime to these mini grids. And that is something that the villagers can assist us in. So we would have to have our guys go all the way to the plant just to do something as simple as an update, right? So under this EU funded project, these are things that we emphasize in the design phase, right? So as to avoid these issues. Again, the limitations in commissioning, as I mentioned, connections household wiring, service entrance, and the distribution network are now funded under these grants. Bill for the billing and payment difficulties. So we are able to use Starlink in Belize City now in remote locations. So from the utility, we will start be using the Starlink services now so that we can have an agent in the community so that the customer could go to these agents within the community and make payments. So I just want to say is that as a country, we came a long way, but this is nothing short of collaboration. To where we are right now, it just shows that with we have good collaboration with the ministry, and that plays an important role because they secure the funding and they use our technical expertise to implement these projects, right? So good collaboration have us in this position where we are now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garbett, for giving us insight into the utility and the challenges it has faced with these implementation projects. It's very important that from the two presentations we've seen so far, being from the government and the utility, the key lessons learned are very important. It allows us to identify the limitations that have impacted our implementation, but it's also important to recognize the resilience from the utility and the ministry in rectifying and addressing those limitations, to strategize and identify mechanisms and implementation concepts that would improve the project and the outcome. So thank you for those insights, Mr. Garbutt. And like I said, we have three institutions at the core of our energy sector in Belize, which includes the regulator, known as the Public Utilities Commission in Belize. Their representative today is Mr. Darvin Roberts. He is an electrical engineer with expertise in energy efficiency and electrical safety. He works on consumer protection, rate setting, and regulatory compliance. Mr. Roberts, please come to the podium.
Good afternoon to all. I'm glad for this opportunity. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Darvin Roberts, and I am presenting on behalf of the Public Utilities Commission. My colleagues have collaborated the different aspects in terms of the ministry, the utility side of in this environment related to energy access. So this presentation today that I'll do is how the PUC is involved with this energy access. Just a little information about the PUC. The PUC was established in 2001 to regulate electricity, water, and telecommunications. Our mission is we create sustainable and competitive markets in the utility and ICT sectors to enhance the national development of Belize. And the vision is that develop continually as a forward-looking regulator by adopting industry best practices that align with Belize's development goals. The Public Utilities Commission of Belize has the authority given by the legal framework that was enacted in 1999. We know it as the Public Utilities Commission Act. And basically that framework gives the authority to the regulator to fix the rates, to have the description for the quality of standards, the service standards, and the commission can issue licenses and issue consents. The commission can also put directives and orders, etc. So we are an independent and autonomous body. The operation of the PUC in terms of energy access, basically, we are governed by the legal framework and also by the policies set forth by the government. The policy that we are looking at is this 2023 National Energy Plan, and there are several objectives, but two of those that I would like to highlight is the reduction of the costs and then the increased access of energy service. Under the 2023 National Energy Plan, the PUC's objective is done through regulation. So everything is done through regulation. The primary objective of the commission is to have the interests of the customers and also the interests of the utility. So this is promoted through competition, through the economy of generation, and the efficient use of electricity. The utility is ensured that they would construct facilities that would enable delivery of service which would be safe and adequate, efficient and reasonable to the customers. Also, the commission ensures that the utility can recover the costs for the investments, and also that there is a reasonable rate of return for the investments. All this is done while maintaining in mind a fair rate to the customers. Under a recent determination that was done by the commission, a 20-year horizon least cost expansion plan was approved. There are several stakeholders within this microgrid scenario. The government of Belize, which is responsible for acquiring funding, and then the ministry, which creates policies. The PUC would follow the policies and then would facilitate the regulatory environment. The single buyer, in this case, which would be the utility, since they are the only licensee to sell power, they would be the ones that are also collaborated during the design period, construction, and the operation of the mini-grids, as you have heard today. Also, another stakeholder are the community organizations. These are very important, especially when we have to do the legal clearance, for example, with the FPIC. And then we also support mini-grids with the licensing. So we license entities, different organizations. We grant consents. And going by the Electricity Act, these are the other licenses that the commission can grant. There is a new regulation that was passed that opens the market. And I will talk about that in the next slide. The mini-grid portfolio, the regulation is enacted, so a mini-grid can generate power now, and the licensing for that can be done, the licensing and monitoring, and then the continuous survey of all the unserved communities can be done in partnership with ministry and the utility. The commission is also responsible for approving of the installations of electrical systems for the consumers, that would be connected not just for the mini-grid, it would be for any connection required to the grid. The universal access is assisted by different programs. The key one is the pro-energy programs, and there are two main ones. The first one is the social tariff rates, which, like has mentioned before, all the rates in Belize are global. So even though your generation would be different, the rate is the same across the board. There is a social tariff rate, which is at 22 cents Belize dollars for a consumption that is not more than 60 kilowatts per month. This is something good, but the challenge here is that you would require a connection to be able to get this assistance. And also the other challenge that probably needs to be relooked at is the limit of 60 kilowatt hours. Probably that needs to increase at some point. The other way this is being helped, the universal access, is with this program called CHILL, Connecting Homes, Improving Lives program. And this is a program that is carried out by the utility. And this program is ratepayer subsidized. So the commission every 4 years approves monies to be used for this CHILL program. So this allows people to get connection, those that have difficulties to get a connection to be connected. And then also there's the utility funded support to senior citizens. Yeah. That's just a bit more on the new licensing regulation that was enacted in 2024. There are 3 main categories of the licenses, and there are about 15 different licenses depending on the different categories. So everybody can generate its own power. It's not limited to any specific technology, and the commission would grant a license for the operation. So overall, the PUC, our approach is through regulation, following the government policies to drive the future of Belize. Thank you for your attention. It was my pleasure.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Before we go into the second segment of today's initiative, I would like to invite you, ladies and gentlemen, to accompany us immediately outside these doors for a brief tea and coffee break. Get your legs stretched, blood running, and we resume with presentations from our regional and international stakeholders. Please accompany us outside.
As we celebrate the contributions to Belize's energy sector, made possible through collaborations with the government of Belize and key stakeholders, and with funding by the European Union, we take this moment to reflect on the achievements of the Light Up Belize project. With technical assistance from GFA Consulting Group in collaboration with the Ministry of Public Utilities, Energy, Logistics, and E-Governance, the project has been instrumental in building capacity to support the activities set out in Belize's Sustainable Energy Roadmap. From shaping a more sustainable energy future for Belize through policy and legislative development, to bringing light to unserved communities with electrification planning and implementation, to building more sustainable energy solutions through collaboration with university and IT-VET partnerships and the private sector for and practical energy management training. The Light Up Belize project has also contributed to reducing emissions and conserving resources through innovative initiatives like the Hotbox project and other energy management programs. Moreover, the project has empowered civil society with technical guidance and communication strategies.
When I think about the technical assistance project under the European Development Fund, the 11th tranche, the first word that comes to my mind is success. Ideally, when you think about a recipe for success, the first word that would come to your mind is passion. And then you would want to think about how much your team is committed to that project. And that's ideally what we had as the Ministry in charge of energy with the technical assistance team under the European Development Fund. Under the leadership of Glenn Morris and his technical assistant, Louis Larihola, they came to Belize in 2020. And this was at the height of COVID time, so you understand the level of commitment and passion that they have for this project. They came and assembled local persons in the form of Rachel Sidasi and Gloria Lemos. And that was really the foundation for them to support the ministry. Under the European Development Fund, we had three major goals. One was energy access, two, e-mobility, and three, the technical assistance. Under technical assistance, they supported the e-mobility project and the energy access project. They also went above and beyond their list of duties, doing multiple other activities which also supported sustainable development. I can tell you as a member of the energy unit, it was a privilege to work with them, especially Mr. Larihola, who definitely passed a lot of knowledge on to us in regards to energy efficiency and renewable energy. Also, I believe the country of Belize will benefit from what they have done in the past 4 years for at least the next 2 decades, as they were able to successfully support us to update our energy policy, which was done last year in October. They also made a big effort in terms of canvassing the country to verify all the villages that didn't have access to electricity. That actually laid the foundation for us to roll out our rural education least cost plan, which is currently being finalized, and that will definitely support us to achieve our 2030 goal of energy access under the SDG 7. And so, without a shadow of doubt, I can say that the technical assistance that we have received from the European Development Fund was very successful. I believe our management, they were very pleased with the work that has been done by the Light Up Belize team. And of course, I would be remiss if I wouldn't thank the European Union for all their support. As we speak, another tranche of funds is already coming into the country, and so the work continues for sustainable development for our country.
Belize became a piloting member state for a regional project entitled Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, which focused on quality infrastructure in the energy sector. And this kick-started the Belize Bureau of Standards journey in developing a national energy efficiency labeling scheme. And within this journey was when the Bureau of Standards was introduced to the Light Up Belize project, where from the get-go we experienced a very fruitful relationship, and the Bureau of Standards received significant support from the Light Up Belize in terms of visibility and promotion. And one very beneficial aspect for us was the capacity building initiatives. Because here at the Bureau, we're going to tell you we're experts in standards development, but we had no experience in energy efficiency. And so the capacity building initiatives allowed us to gain the knowledge and understanding to develop our national energy efficiency labeling scheme. So for that, we are forever grateful to the Light Up Belize project.
Pleasant good day. I am Egbert Irving, the Director of Institutional Advancement at the University of Belize. And I'm pleased with the relationship that we've developed with the team at Light Up for the past 2 or so years. We have done several thematic projects, which includes capacity building. For example, Light Up Belize have been able to provide training to our students, to our faculty, as well as members of staff. We have also engaged in stakeholder engagement. For example, the Energy Efficiency Learning Network, which provides a forum where individuals can learn from each other techniques and strategies in order for these entities to become much more energy efficient. We've also explored opportunities for further research and training in the field of energy in Belize. The Light Up project has allowed us to get the necessary support, the necessary funding for us to conduct a survey, to conduct an assessment to determine whether or not the university can play a more intimate role in terms of the energy research that the private sector requires, that the public sector requires, and of course the training needs for those who would like to expand their skills or who would like to venture into the energy services sector. We're very much pleased with the relationship that we've developed, and we are hoping that we will build upon what has been established over the past year or 2 years. We look forward to continuing to work in the energy sector, and we would like to thank Light Up for the opportunity they have provided in terms of those areas that I have just highlighted.
This project is it's quite important because it provides technical assistance to several other initiatives of the European Union, including projects with the National Utility for Energy, BEL, and with the actions particularly important in the south of the country, in the Toledo district, where there are currently being built mini grids for energy production for populations that so far did not have energy from the national grid. The program is also important in terms of preparing the legal framework for energy and specifically for renewable energy production. And I would like to make a quick parenthesis here on renewable energy, because one of the objectives of the European Union and the United Nations as well, it's SDG 7, safe and sustainable energy for all. And here the renewables are very important, and they are also important for the country because Belize has committed to a national determined contribution in terms of the Paris Agreement, and that commitment implies the reduction of CO2 emissions. In addition, by increasing its production of renewable energy, the country can save substantial amounts of money in foreign exchange currency. I'm referring to the energy that is currently supplied by Mexico. And in addition, with more renewable energy, there can be the possibility of earning revenues from carbon credits. So altogether, this is a very important and fundamental area, and Light Up is contributing decisively for this purpose. Therefore, I'm very happy with the way the program was implemented. We are now close to its end. I'm very happy with the team of experts that we were lucky enough to to get to welcome in Belize. And I hope that further initiatives of this kind could be funded by us and other donors for Belize and also for other countries in Central America and the Caribbean.
The Light Up Belize project leaves behind a lasting legacy of professionalism, sustainability, partnerships, and new standards for Belize's energy sector, with sustainability at the heart of every achievement. The hot box is an insulated thermal cooker designed to promote more energy-efficient cooking, particularly in rural communities. It allows users to cook food using retained heat. The Hot Box project aims to empower rural women in Belize by providing them with a sustainable cooking solution which improves their health and socioeconomic well-being.
During my experience in using the hot box, I found it very easy. It was less work than on fire hearth and on stove, because on the hot box what I did was put my beans to cook for a couple minutes, like 20 to 30 minutes, and then place it in the hot box, and then I leave it there, cover it up, and then I do other house chores, which I find it like less work then.
I cook it in the evening, like 7, and I cook 2 pong beans. I started on the stove like 15 minutes, then I put it in the hot box, like I leave it there, it get cooked, and I wake up in the morning, then I can check it, then like it take like 9 hours to cook.
I did 5 experiments. I did 3 of the beans and 1 rice and chicken. So with the rice, it is very, very easy. I find it very easy. That's the easiest one that I could ever tell about. And then the chicken is the second one, then the beans, because the beans is kind of hard. So I think that takes a little time. The chicken was cooked just like on the stove. I tried it on the hot box, it was the same, so I can't complain.
I can't believe it too that it will cook right there. So one time I try it for myself, then right there I see it works.
Using the hot box is more cheaper than using a butane gas tank. Then you only need a little couple minutes of cooking the food on the stove, and then you place it in the hot box, which is using less energy. And I think it would benefit the other ladies in my community.
We did the testing of the hot box while we are cooking the beans. So a lot of women came with me and asked how we use the hot box, and they're asking me if it works. I share the beans, then I share the beans with them to make them believe it works, and then try, and then they are interested to have it in this village. They are willing to have the hot box in their own home. So then see it works, so they are willing, they're interested.
The hot box has significant social impacts on rural communities in Belize, particularly improves health and safety by minimizing exposure to smoke and fire risks, provides economic and financial savings with a reduction in energy consumption used for cooking, improves quality of life by allowing more time spent on family activities, and creates women empowerment through income opportunities. Traditional cooking methods in rural communities, such as open fire and wood-burning stoves, pose several environmental challenges. These challenges include deforestation, air pollution, and greenhouse gas emissions, contributing to climate change. The hot box offers multiple environmental benefits, including lowering deforestation rates by reducing the need for firewood, which helps to conserve forests and maintain biodiversity. Improved air quality, because decreasing the reliance on biomass fuels reduces air pollution both indoors and outdoors. And the hot box mitigates climate change by reducing energy consumption in cooking, which supports global efforts to reduce CO2 emissions.
For me, the hot box is safer because, for example, on the stove, then when cooking, sometimes you just have to go and do other things beside that. So for me, the hot box is very safe. Once you place it there, you leave it there. Like, the child won't get burned if she come closer or he come closer to it.
Like with the open fire, when kids the fire drop, then will get burned. Like then in the hot box, no, because that is safe to kids.
You don't have to worry nothing or like if it will burn or it will dry.
When you are on the fire, then you have to mind it because sometimes it drop, then it start to burn, the house burn. Then in the hot box, when you start cook in the fire, then you put it there, then you leave it there, and burn nothing.
The hot box also contributes to Belize's national climate goals by supporting policies which promote energy efficiency, decarbonization, and forest conservation.
Take lot wood for get cook.
Without the hot box, I will use like this bunch of firewood, and with the hot box, I use small amount.
Like using the hot box, it's kind of less work, like using less fuel.
It's hard to find wood right there because it rain right there, and then sometimes the wood get wet.
I think other people would like it because, like for the firewood, sometimes it's raining and you can't get firewood. So I think people would like it.
Join us in promoting more sustainable cooking practices in Belize. As we celebrate the contributions to Belize's energy sector, made possible through collaborations with the government of Belize and key stakeholders, and with funding by the European Union, we take this moment to reflect on the achievements of the Light Up Belize project. With technical assistance from GFA Consulting Group in collaboration with the Ministry of Public Utilities, Energy, Logistics, and E-Governance, the project has been instrumental in building capacity to support the activities set out in Belize's Sustainable Energy Roadmap. From shaping a more sustainable energy future for Belize through policy and legislative development, to bringing light to unserved communities with electrification planning and implementation, to building more sustainable energy solutions through collaboration with university and ITVET partnerships and the private sector for and practical energy management training. The Light Up Belize project has also contributed to reducing emissions and conserving resources through innovative initiatives like the Hot Box project and other energy management programs. Moreover, the project has empowered civil society with technical guidance and communication strategies.
When I think about the technical assistance project under the European Development Fund, the 11th tranche, the first word that comes to my mind is success. Ideally, when you think about a recipe for success, the first word that would come to your mind is passion. And then you would want to think about how much your team is committed to that project. And that's ideally what we had as the ministry in charge of energy with the technical assistance team under the European Development Fund. Under the leadership of Glenn Morris and his technical assistant, Louis Larihola, they came to Belize in 2020 And this was at the height of COVID time, so you understand the level of commitment and passion that they have for this project. They came and assembled local persons in the form of Rachel Sidasi and Gloria Lemos, and that was really the foundation for them to support the ministry. Under the European Development Fund, we had 3 major goals. 1 was energy access, 2, e-mobility, and 3, the technical assistance. Under technical assistance, they supported the e-mobility project and the energy access project. They also went above and beyond their list of duties, doing multiple other activities which also supported sustainable development. I can tell you, as a member of the energy unit, it was a privilege to work with them, especially Mr. Larry Hola, who definitely passed a lot of knowledge on to us in regards to energy efficiency and renewable energy. Also, I believe the country of Belize will benefit from what they have done in the past 4 years for at least the next 2 decades, as they were able to successfully support us to update our energy policy, which was done last year in October. They also made a big effort in terms of canvassing the country to verify all the villages that didn't have access to electricity. That actually laid the foundation for us to roll out our rural education least cost plan, which is currently being finalized, and that will definitely support us to achieve our 2030 goal of energy access under the SDG 7. And so, without a shadow of doubt, I can say that the technical assistance that we have received from the European Development Fund was very successful. I believe our management, they were very pleased with the work that has been done by the Light Up Belize team. And of course, I would be remiss if I wouldn't thank the European Union for all their support. As we speak, another tranche of funds is already coming into the country, and so the work continues for sustainable development for our country.
Belize became a piloting member state for a regional project entitled Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, which focused on quality infrastructure in the energy sector. And this kick-started the Belize Bureau of Standards journey in developing a national energy efficiency labeling scheme. And within this journey was when the Bureau of Standards was introduced to the Light Up Belize project, where from the get-go we experienced a very fruitful relationship, and the Bureau of Standards received significant support from the Light Up Belize in terms of visibility and promotion. And one very beneficial aspect for us was the capacity building initiatives. Because here at the Bureau, we're going to tell you we're experts in standards development, but we had no experience in energy efficiency. And so the capacity building initiatives allowed us to gain the knowledge and understanding to develop our national energy efficiency labeling scheme. So for that, we are forever grateful to the Light Up Belize project.
Pleasant good day. I am Egbert Irving, the Director of Institutional Advancement at the University of Belize. And I'm pleased with the relationship that we've developed with the team at Light Up for the past 2 or so years. We have done several thematic projects, which includes capacity building. For example, Light Up Belize have been able to provide training to our students, to our faculty, as well as members of staff. We have also engaged in stakeholder engagement. For example, the Energy Efficiency Learning Network, which provides a forum where individuals can learn from each other techniques and strategies in order for these entities to become much more energy efficient. We've also explored opportunities for further research and training in the field of energy in Belize. The Light Up project has allowed us to get the necessary support, the necessary funding for us to conduct a survey, to conduct an assessment to determine whether or not the university can play a more intimate role in terms of the energy research that the private sector requires, that the public sector requires, and of course the training needs for those who would like to expand their skills or who would like to venture into the energy services sector. We're very much pleased with the relationship that we've developed, and we are hoping that we will build upon what has been established over the past year or 2 years. We look forward to continuing to work in the energy sector, and we would like to thank Light Up for the opportunity they have provided in terms of those areas that I have just highlighted.
This project is it's quite important because it provides technical assistance to several other initiatives of the European Union, including projects with the National Utility for Energy, BEL, and with the actions particularly important in the south of the country, in the Toledo district, where there are currently being built mini-grids for energy production for populations that so far do not have energy from the national grid. The program is also important in terms of preparing the legal framework for energy and specifically for renewable energy production. And I would like to make a quick parenthesis here on renewable energy, because one of the objectives of the European Union and the United Nations as well, it's SDG 7, safe and sustainable energy for all. And here the renewables are very important, and they are also important for the country because Belize has committed to a national determined contribution in terms of the Paris Agreement, and that commitment implies the reduction of CO2 emissions. In addition, by increasing its production of renewable energy, the country can save substantial amounts of money in foreign exchange currency. I'm referring to the energy that is currently supplied by Mexico. And in addition, with more renewable energy, there can be the possibility of earning revenues from carbon credits. So altogether, this is a very important and fundamental area, and LATAP is contributing decisively for this purpose. Therefore, I'm very happy with the way the program was implemented. We are now close to its end. I'm very happy with the team of experts that we were lucky enough to get to welcome in Belize. And I hope that further initiatives of this kind could be funded by us and other donors for Belize and also for other countries in Central America and the Caribbean.
The Light Up Belize project leaves behind a lasting legacy of professionalism, sustainability, partnerships, and new standards for Belize's energy sector, with sustainability at the heart of every achievement. The hot box is an insulated thermal cooker designed to promote more energy-efficient cooking, particularly in rural communities. It allows users to cook food using retained heat. The Hot Box project aims to empower rural women in Belize by providing them with a sustainable cooking solution which improves their health and socioeconomic well-being.
During my experience in using the hot box, I found it very easy. It was less work than on fire heart and on stove, because on the hot box what I did was put my beans to cook for a couple minutes, like 20 to 30 minutes, and then place it in the hot box, and then I leave it there, cover it up, and then I do other house chores, which I find it like less work then.
I cook it in the evening, like 7, and I cook 2 pong beans. I started on the stove like 15 minutes, then I put it in the hot box, like I leave it there, it get cooked, and I wake up in the morning, then I can check it, then like it take like 9 hours to cook.
I did 5 experiments. I did 3 of the beans and 1 rice and chicken. So with the rice, it is very, very easy. I find it very easy. That's the easiest one that I could ever tell about. And then the chicken is the second one, then the beans, because the beans is kind of hard. So I think that takes a little time. The chicken was cooked just like on the stove. I tried it on the hot box. It was the same, so I can't complain.
I can't believe it too that it will cook right there. So one time I try it for myself, then right there I see it works.
Using the hot box is more cheaper than using a butane gas tank. Then you only need a little couple minutes of cooking the food on the stove, and then you place it in the hot box, which is using less energy. And I think it would benefit the other ladies in my community.
We did the testing of the hot box while we are cooking the beans. So a lot of women came with me and asked how we use the hot box, and they're asking me if it works. I share the beans, then I share the beans with them to make them believe it works, and then try, and then they are interested to have it in this village. They are willing to have the hot box in their own home. So then see it works, so they are willing, they're interested.
The hot box has significant social impacts on rural communities in Belize, particularly improves health and safety by minimizing exposure to smoke and fire risks, provides economic and financial savings with a reduction in energy consumption used for cooking, improves quality of life by allowing more time spent on family activities, and creates women empowerment through income opportunities. Traditional cooking methods in rural communities, such as open fire and wood-burning stoves, pose several environmental challenges. These challenges include deforestation, air pollution, and greenhouse gas emissions, contributing to climate change. The hot box offers multiple environmental benefits, including lowering deforestation rates by reducing the need for firewood, which helps to conserve forests and maintain biodiversity. Improved air quality, because decreasing the reliance on biomass fuels reduces air pollution both indoors and outdoors. And the hot box mitigates climate change by reducing energy consumption in cooking, which supports global efforts to reduce CO2 emissions.
For me, the hot box is safer because, for example, on the stove, then when cooking, sometimes you just have to go and do other things beside that. So for me, the hot box is very safe. Once you place it there, you leave it there. Like, the child won't get burned if she come closer or he come closer to it.
Like with the open fire, when kids the fire drop, then will get burned. Like then in the hot box, no, because that is safe for kids.
You don't have to worry nothing, or like if it will burn or it will dry.
When you are on the fire, then you have to mind it, because sometimes it drop, then it start to burn, the house burn. Then in the hot box, when you start cook in the fire, then you put it there, then you leave it there, and burn nothing.
The hot box also contributes to Belize's national climate goals by supporting policies which promote energy efficiency, decarbonization, and forest conservation.
Take lot wood for get cook.
Without the hot box, I will use like this bunch of firewood, and with the hot box, I use small amount.
Like using the hot box, it's kind of less work, like using less fuel.
It's hard to find wood right there because it rain right there. And then sometimes the wood and get wet.
I think other people would like it because, like for the firewood, sometimes it's raining and you can't get firewood. So I think people would like it.
Join us in promoting more sustainable cooking practices in Belize. As we celebrate the contributions to Belize's energy sector, made possible through collaborations with the government of Belize and key stakeholders, and with funding by the European Union, we take this moment to reflect on the achievements of the Light Up Belize project. With technical assistance from GFA Consulting Group in collaboration with the Ministry of Public Utilities, Energy, Logistics and E-Governance, the project has been instrumental in building capacity to support the activities set out in Belize's Sustainable Energy Roadmap. From shaping a more sustainable energy future for Belize through policy and legislative development, to bringing light to unserved communities with electrification planning and implementation, to building more sustainable energy solutions through collaboration with university and ITVET partnerships and the private sector for and practical energy management training. The Light Up Belize project has also contributed to reducing emissions and conserving resources through innovative initiatives like the Hotbox project and other energy management programs. Moreover, the project has empowered civil society with technical guidance and communication strategies.
When I think about the technical assistance project under the European Development Fund, the 11th tranche, the first word that comes to my mind is success. Ideally, when you think about a recipe for success, the first word that would come to your mind is passion. And then you would want to think about how much your team is committed to that project. And that's ideally what we had as the ministry in charge of energy with the technical assistance team under the European Development Fund. Under the leadership of Glenn Morris and his technical assistant, Louis Larihola, they came to Belize in 2020, and this was at the height of COVID time, so you understand the level of commitment and passion that they have for this project. They came and assembled local persons in the form of Rachel Sidasi and Gloria Lemos, and that was really the foundation for them to support the ministry. Under the European Development Fund, we had three major goals. One was energy access, two, e-mobility, and three, the technical assistance. Under technical assistance, they supported the e-mobility project and the energy access project. They also went above and beyond their list of duties, doing multiple other activities which also supported sustainable development. I can tell you, as a member of the energy unit, it was a privilege to work with them, especially Mr. Larihola, who definitely passed a lot of knowledge on to us in regards to energy efficiency and renewable energy. Also, I believe the country of Belize will benefit from what they have done in the past 4 years for at least the next 2 decades, as they were able to successfully support us to update our energy policy, which was done last year in October. They also made a big effort in terms of canvassing the country to verify all the villages that didn't have access to electricity. That actually laid the foundation for us to roll out our rural education least cost plan, which is currently being finalized, and that will definitely support us to achieve our 2030 goal of energy access under the SDG 7. And so, without a shadow of doubt, I can say that the technical assistance that we have received from the European Development Fund was very successful. I believe our management, they were very pleased with the work that has been done by the Light Up Belize team. And of course, I would be remiss if I wouldn't thank the European Union for all their support. As we speak, another tranche of funds is all already coming into the country, and so the work continues for sustainable development for our country.
Belize became a piloting member state for a regional project entitled Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, which focused on quality infrastructure in the energy sector. And this kick-started the Belize Bureau of Standards journey in developing a national energy efficiency labeling scheme. And within this journey was when the Bureau of Standards was introduced to the Light Up Belize project, where from the get-go we experienced a very fruitful relationship, and the Bureau of Standards received significant support from the Light Up Belize in terms of visibility and promotion. And one very beneficial aspect for us was the capacity building initiatives. Because here at the Bureau, we're going to tell you we're experts in standards development, but we had no experience in energy efficiency. And so the capacity building initiatives allowed us to gain the knowledge and understanding to develop our national energy efficiency labeling scheme. So for that, we are forever grateful to the Light Up Belize project.
Pleasant good day. I am Egbert Irving, the Director of Institutional Advancement at the University of Belize. And I'm pleased with the relationship that we've developed with the team at Light Up for the past 2 or so years. We have done several thematic projects, which includes capacity building. For example, Light Up Belize have been able to provide training to our students, to our faculty, as well as members of staff. We have also engaged in stakeholder engagement. For example, the Energy Efficiency Learning Network, which provides a forum where individuals can learn from each other techniques and strategies in order for these entities to become much more energy efficient. We've also explored opportunities for further research and training in the field of energy in Belize. The Light Up project has allowed us to get the necessary support, the necessary funding for us to conduct a survey, to conduct an assessment to determine whether or not the university can play a more intimate role in terms of the energy research that the private sector requires, that the public sector requires, and of course the training needs for those who would like to expand their skills or who would like to venture into the energy services sector. We're very much pleased with the relationship that we've developed, and we are hoping that we will build upon what has been established over the past year or 2 years. We look forward to continuing to work in the energy sector, and we would like to thank Light Up for the opportunity they have provided in terms of those areas that I have just highlighted.
This project it's quite important because it provides technical assistance to several other initiatives of the European Union, including projects with the National Utility for Energy, BEL, and with the actions particularly important in the south of the country, in the Toledo district, where there are currently being built mini-grids for energy production for populations that so far do not have energy from the national grid. The program is also important in terms of preparing the legal framework for energy and specifically for renewable energy production. And I would like to make a quick parenthesis here on renewable energy, because one of the objectives of the European Union and the United Nations as well, it's SDG 7, safe and sustainable energy for all. And here the renewables are very important, and they are also important for the country because Belize has committed to a national determined contribution in terms of the Paris Agreement, and that commitment implies the reduction of CO2 emissions. In addition, by increasing its production of renewable energy, the country can save substantial amounts of money in foreign exchange currency. I'm referring to the energy that is currently supplied by Mexico. And in addition, with more renewable energy.
Welcome back, everyone. I'm sure you've all been re-energized having some coffee and some snacks. Welcome back to the second segment of today's session. Our engagement this afternoon, we anticipate that it would be interactive. One of the important things for us here in the Caribbean is understanding what it is that our international and national counterparts are doing within the region so that we can identify opportunities for development within our nations. We all have different priority areas, and that's key for our development individually and as a region. So this afternoon, we want to hear from our stakeholders, our international stakeholders. And firstly, we have a presentation from IRENA. To represent them today is Mr. Gurbuz Gunul. Okay, there we go. He's the Director of Country Engagement and Partnerships at IRENA. He leads IRENA's global renewable energy strategies and partnerships, and he's a former senior energy economist at the Islamic Development Bank. Mr. Gunul, please come forward. Welcome him, guys.
Thank you very much for the introduction. And it's really great pleasure to be part of the discussions today, part of this dialogue, and to empowering remote Belize and looking into solutions for last mile electrification in the country. IRENA is an intergovernmental organization. I think energy access has been on top of our agenda since the early days. Although we have evolved from simple electrification solutions to more also bringing the value creation angle into the work of IRENA, looking into more also productive use, as well as electrification solutions as part of the bigger efforts. And particularly our work has been driven by two programs in the energy access space that we have been implementing for some time. One is the program on transitioning remote communities with renewables. That's a program that we have launched 3 years ago together with the government of Canada. The other program is the Empowering Lives and Livelihoods with Renewables, which is more focused on the productive use in health and agriculture sectors. Starting with the first one, in fact, the discussions with Canada at that time started with or based on the Canadian government's efforts to transition the indigenous communities in the north of the country from diesel-based solutions to renewables. And we discussed that how these solutions that they have implemented can be used to inspire action on the ground. Then we expanded the program, expanded the approach, not only decarbonizing the existing diesel genset-based generation, but looking into clean energy access solutions, but also how to provide reliability of supply. But so you may still be connected to the grid or have a solution, but still you may not have a reliable supply of energy. And in that program, specifically, obviously, we defined remoteness. How do we understand, what do we understand from remoteness? And what is the size of the problem, or what is the size of the population that we are talking about when we're talking about remoteness? And in that context, we specifically looking into those communities located far, at tough terrains, usually last mile communities. We are also looking into indigenous communities which are also remote located far from the grid. But also those refugees, refugee camps, or internally displaced communities, whatever the reasons are, and who have a remote chance of grid extension. And this, you see on the screen, the potential to serve. I mean, we're talking about globally 1 billion people living in mountain regions far from the grid. We're talking about island populations, 9% of the global population. Similarly, indigenous population as well as refugees. So it's the kind of, we are talking about really a big segment of customers, potential customers who do not have access to grid. And our focus is off-grid solutions because we see the great potential, and it is the economically viable and technically implementable solution, and which is kind of expanding exponentially in the last several years. And today, 155 million people, they rely on off-grid solutions for electrification. And when we look at the over 2 million cumulative number of off-grid renewable energy systems deployed as of end of 2023, you see how it has been utilized by the sector. So it's not only about electrification or lighting, but also deployment for the purpose of end-use sectors and more stimulating lives and livelihoods in those countries. Bioenergy and solar solutions, they take the lead in terms of deployment, but also hydro and wind, they closely follow. And as a first step in the program implementation, we started with bringing together those good practices, good implementations. Obviously starting with the indigenous communities in Canada, but they expanded to different parts of the world and looking into different solutions for different sort of communities. And try to kind of collect the lessons and what made it possible, what are the factors that made it success in terms of deployment. We looked together with Canada. There is also we picked another committee from Scotland, from the developed world, but many of the other countries are more from the developing world and looking into a different, representing different institutional setup, different renewable energy technology use, and different remoteness, as I have defined earlier in the previous slide. We looked into solutions that has been successfully implemented at least 2 years, so there is a sustainability element. But many of the solutions that we have implemented has been there for more than 6 years. Even some of them are over 10 years successfully operated. It's important to how we design the system based on the electricity needs. This is a well-known multi-tier electricity access chart, defining different tiers of needs from tier 1 to tier 5 being the highest. But also it represents, the tiers represents also the economic status of customers, because in many the last mile implementations, we see the communities are at tier 2, tier 3. But more in the developed world, developed countries, it's tier 5. So it also represents the different level of needs in implementation. And there are different electricity consumption plans for implementation. The regular billing pay as much as consumed in many countries that we see is implemented. Prepaid cards, pay as you go, in Scotland and many of the African countries you may know successfully implemented. Defining different tiers of service and providing monthly plans in successfully implemented in some other places. And it's like in the Côte d'Ivoire level of usage package, especially defining those households from more productive use applications and providing different tariffs is one of the other methodologies that we have seen. So there is no one single approach or that worked well, but depending on the context, depending on the setup and market structure, different applications can be made. And then what are the key factors for success and what are the building blocks for successful project implementations? And I would like to share with you some of the points, some of the conclusions that we have gathered out of those 9 case studies that we have looked into. One is the importance of program design and looking into, instead of one-time installation approach, but instead looking into more comprehensive program implementation, looking into different dimensions of successful implementation, including O&M, how to define O&M, how to define the implementation structure, technologies, etc. And for instance, Sarawak in Malaysia has done a great job in that. And defined their, and clearly defined the path to achieve their ambition set by the government. And this is an example of electrifying 550 villages by 2025. They are completing by this year through solar solutions and looking into how O&M has been designed. And CapEx and major spares are funded by utility through government, and they have defined and successfully implemented methodology. Then the choice of renewable energy technology. There is, as I told you, there are 4 different technologies which are widely implemented. The Isle of Egg in Scotland, they bring together 3 technologies in one go. Hydro, solar, wind together, to be able to provide the need in the implementation. The importance of data and collect data on the ground before you start designing the project to clearly understand the energy consumption and projected loads, productive use requirements, incomes, willingness to pay. So you really need to collect data before you put together the key elements to help you design properly for the system. Very much favor of light-handed policies and regulatory measures. You can have the best well-defined, sophisticated policy regulatory system in place, which is not practically impossible to implement. And therefore, it is very important to kind of clearly put together the right structure that is best and easily implementable on the ground. You have to take into consideration of also cultural factors. You have to really understand the local needs and rely on local knowledge and experience. And they know best what works, what doesn't, and rely on that knowledge and build on it and to develop the best innovative way of policy and regulatory setup. Productive use, as I mentioned earlier, is extremely important. You have to generate cash flow to the communities. There are good examples. In Nepal, for instance, is one of those. And they have developed a system where rural mountain community, they own and operate the system. And tariffs are fixed and they are collected into a microfinance, into a revenue stream and given as microfinance loans to community to stimulate economic activity in the rural populations. Community involvement, I think This is very well known to all of us. Bring them on board as early as possible, and to be able to have their strong buy-in, to avoid any objections, to increase the willingness to pay, and bring them sometimes as investor. There are examples that they come in as an investor, but in many instances there are also operator and maintenance service provider in quite a number of systems. Based on the last point, a bit more elaborate on that. Because bringing community early on, I think it will maximize the benefits for the community. But also there are different ways of bringing community into the system. There are solar cooperatives successfully implemented, village federation and technician associations, where village federation is more on the owning and managing the system, bring technician associations for the repair part, maintenance part. Electric cooperatives, creating micro-utilities, PV electrification community. There are different schemes that organizationally defining the right structure with the communities and for governing and operational maintenance of the systems installed. Financing strategies is important, and what we see currently in I think many of those schemes that we have reviewed are more grant-based, and upfront costs are generally financed through government programs and donor-driven grants. I've mentioned about the equity contribution by communities, but it's limited. As you see, those cases we reviewed is 1% to 3%. It's very small, and these are usually the small systems. And as the systems expand, there are different financing structures that we have seen. And also, we also encourage the stakeholders to look into other options, because there is so much grant available, and not everything can be done with grant. And it's important to use the scarce resources of public funds wisely, and whether we can mobilize private sector into this by blend grant debt, more sweet funds that we can extend patient capital, looking into different certificate structures, etc. So there are different ways of it, but each option, solution needs to be assessed with its merits in that particular market, and how practically it could be implemented to create an affordable mechanism of financing for customers. I will speak a little bit more about the productive use, because this is the second program that IRENA has been implementing more than a year. We launched it during Dubai COP. And this is specifically looking into integrating decentralized renewable energy solutions into agriculture and health value chains. This area, I think there is a lot of work being done, but it's quite fragmented and far from achieving scale, because the main reason we started this program is whether we can achieve a transformative impact at the sector level. These are not energy projects. These are sectoral programs. It is about food security. It is about health security, and energy is an ingredient into it. And how it can help scale up deployment in a sustainable way, efficient way, but also by increasing the productivity. The solutions are kind of looking into these three aspects, obviously accompanied by affordable financing mechanisms. Currently, we have been engaged in 13 countries, largely in sub-Saharan Africa, but one in the Caribbean, Cuba, on the agri side, and another in Nepal. And basically, the way we develop the program is to do it together at the local level with stakeholders, because these are local programs and it has to be developed with local people. So you have to become part of the ecosystem. You have to understand the ecosystem very well, and then work together to assess what is needed to scope it right, and then develop those viable technical solutions. Then work with the partners, local and international financial partners, to develop an corresponding affordable financing mechanism, but also complemented with the ecosystem building, ecosystem capacity building, because local solutions should be implemented by locals. And you have to develop local capacities to be able to provide supply and service chains, develop entrepreneurs, support local banking, to be able to create the right ecosystem for sustainable implementation. And I would like to give you two examples which is relevant to Belize, in my view, two important economic sectors. One economic and the other is more public sector, healthcare. And we have done São Tomé and Príncipe in the African island, is one of the countries we have engaged with. And here we made an effort to transform the entire healthcare landscape in the country, because there are two problems in the country. Country is 100% grid connected, but there is no sufficient energy, reliable supply of electricity. So it includes around 42 healthcare clinics, including 2 hospitals. We looked into 2 solutions. One is using solar as a backup, and the other solution is to make it available as an independent solution, solar solution, in those health facilities. And we came up with numbers. I mean, for healthcare centers and health posts, and altogether around 10.25 million US dollars investment needs to electrify with renewables the complete healthcare infrastructure. And this was received very positively by the government. And they have engaged with partners, with World Bank and one private CSR, and already raised funds to invest in 1/3, to transform 1/3 of the healthcare infrastructure in the country. So this was one of the successful examples that we have been pursuing with the government. The second one is fisheries in Mauritania. And the fisheries sector is an extremely important sector for Mauritania. It's half of the exports revenues are coming from the fish exports. And the sector employs around 66,000 people and 220,000 more indirect jobs. And basically the approach has been twofold. One is to retrofitting some of those boats, fishing boats, with electric motor and battery. So basically transforming it to sustainability and making it cheaper and more sustainable for the fishing sector. The second one was the cold chains, developing and cold chains in the sector, because the waste post-catch was very high. And with this transformation, around 70% reduction is expected in the post-catch losses in the country. And we have estimated around 70 million US dollars investment, and now kind of developing a demonstration project in the country for testing the implementation with a smaller scale, which will lead to hopefully and larger scale deployment in the coming years. So this is all I would like to share with you. These are the 2 programs that I have elaborated on in my presentation. And very much looking forward to also hear from you and working with you also in Belize to see how we can collaborate in the coming period, both on the global initiative of transitioning remote communities, but also on Lives and Livelihoods program, or on the productive use side. And we are very much looking forward to having your feedback on that also. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Gano. I think one of the key takeaways for me is understanding the importance of consumer engagement. We need to understand that the impact of these development projects really hits hard on the communities, the people, and it's been very rewarding. I was sharing with Mr. Gonol during the break that one of the greatest rewards is experiencing and seeing the impact of these implementation projects, just bringing electricity, granting access to these communities. It develops the community and it transforms lives, and that's very important. It's at the heart of these implementation projects. So as we continue, we would like to invite our colleague, Ms. Kimisha Thomas from GIZ to make her presentation. Ms. Thomas is the Regional Caribbean Advisor at GIZ. She's an expert in environmental policy and energy resilience in the Caribbean. She's also the former Senior Policy Advisor for the Dominican Ministry of Environment. She comes with over 15 years of experience in the sector, having worked with the UNDP, the Jeff Small Grants Program, and the Archbold Tropical Research and Education Center. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Ms. Thomas.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm happy I'm presenting after everybody has a chance to eat. Okay, I feel good about that. So my name is Kimisha Thomas. You can call me Kimmy. I'm the Regional Advisor, Caribbean Advisor for the GIZ contribution to the Euroclima program. And I'm very excited to be here with you to share some of the renewable energy actions that GIZ is implemented within the framework of the Euroclima Caribbean program. Okay. So currently, GIZ is implementing 3 actions which are focused basically on solar PV. The first is a solar microgrid demonstration project in St. Lucia. Second, we are working in close collaboration with the Guyana Energy Agency through a grant agreement where we are supporting the electrification of 1 remote hinterland village in Guyana using solar PV. And at the regional level, we are conducting a PV system impact and hosting capacity study. So I will delve a little bit into each of these interventions, starting with St. Lucia. In St. Lucia, we are set to implement a renewable energy microgrid that would power 2 public schools in the Dennery district. These are the Dennery Infant School and the Dennery Primary School. So the microgrid that we'll be doing would power both schools, where it's, like I said, it would be a microgrid, right? So it will only be powering 2 schools where the PV system would be set up and installed on one of the schools, which would be the Dennery Infant School, and provide energy to both of the schools. These schools also serve as emergency hurricane shelters for the local community and surrounding communities. So this initiative will not only enhance the energy resilience of the community, but will also strengthen, their disaster recovery capabilities as well. Additionally, this project will include water pumps, right, which would be connected to existing tanks that are already there at the property, right, but they do not have enough there's not enough pressure to be able to do anything whenever, like, there's no actual running water. So like these water pumps will also be powered by the microgrid, and that would further support the community's needs during times of emergency situations, right? We will also be conducting some capacity building activities and so on with stakeholders, including key stakeholders within the community, including teachers, some students, some parents, community members who are interested in solar PV and so on, right? Because we want to make sure that, there is some degree of energy efficiency that's also being applied as well, right? Because we want to make sure that, the systems that we put in place can last as long as possible. We'll also engage in consultations focused on legislation and policy development. So this process will basically involve the drafting of a policy paper on microgrids, which will facilitate the incorporation in local infrastructure to support resilience, sustainability, as well as grid modernization. So the key stakeholders who will participate in these type of consultations would include, of course, the legal departments of the government of St. Lucia, but also energy stakeholders, which would include, like we have understood here today, the regulatory body. So in St. Lucia, that would be the National Utilities Regulatory Commission, or NERC, because we like an acronym. LUSTELEC, another acronym, which is the St. Lucia Electricity Services, which is their utility, and of course, the government, the energy division, and the departments that we'll be working with directly with this project, which is the Department of Infrastructure, Ports, and Transport. Additionally, we'll also be making some recommendations to update certain technical codes and so on that already exist, such as the grid code or the electric grid code regulations that was done in 2024, right? So that we want to make sure that they can ensure that they account for in the integration of microgrids in these technical codes. Another key focus that we'll be looking at in St. Lucia will be to identify regulatory requirements for licensing, as microgrids are not currently addressed in legislation. So we will determine the necessary regulatory framework to be able to seamlessly integrate microgrids into the main grid. So to date, like I said, this is one of the projects that we are just starting off with. So to date, we have engaged the key project partners, and I'm noticing there's a trend in all of the projects that we've mentioned here today, that the first thing we have to do is community engagement. So we're on the right track, right? We have had 2 stakeholder meetings already so far. We've conducted some site visits, the most recent one being done at the end of January of this year. And we are currently assessing site feasibility and so on. So our team is currently reviewing an original design and feasibility study that was done in a previous project, because as much as possible, if there's any way that we can move on from another project instead of actually starting from scratch, we want to do so. That's bang for buck. Right, so this review, along with the above mentioned actions and so on that we want to do, and the continued discussions that we'll be having with our country counterparts and key stakeholders and so on, will help to further define the technical scope of the project that we would want to implement. And so this would basically inform on things like the size of the system that would be required, any sort of mounting requirements, the placement, technical designs, and so on of the system that we would want to implement at Dennery. We've also started and just begun engaging with Guyana on a very exciting project, which, as you would see, is going to have a lot of similarities in what was done with Light Up Belize in Belize, right? And so that's where I'm seeing that we might be able to really learn from you and learn from each other right? I saw some lessons learned already for some of the challenges that we've been facing. So I'm looking forward to further collaboration, right? So this initiative that we're doing in Guyana provides Guyana with the opportunity basically to utilize low carbon energy source to improve energy access. The project involves installing a solar PV mini grid with battery storage in a hinterland community called Waramuri Village. It's in Region 1 of Guyana, which is Barima, Waini. And we are going to, the only difference I see so far is that we're going to use this system to power government buildings and community service facilities instead of households. So currently, Raramuri lacks access to mains electricity, or the main electricity grid, because it's very difficult to have that in such a remote location. The community therefore relies on a 125 kVA Caterpillar generator set or genset and low voltage distribution network to supply electricity to the community buildings as well as to some households. So this project that we want to do will provide reliable electricity to 21 public buildings in the village, benefiting the 402 population of Waramuri village. These buildings would receive at least 18 hours of electricity per day from a solar mini grid, while the private properties and households and so on will continue to get their energy through the generator. However, a bypass will be implemented to ensure that the public buildings would also have backup power through that generator if needed. The proposed solar system that we are hoping to install will be capable of generating 102 kilowatts of power under optimal sunlight, or 102 kWp system, and 691 kilowatt hours of battery storage system. And I can't remember which of the presentations that we had before. One of the presenters said that whenever we have a system, we want to make sure that we have a larger battery storage power bank, right? So again, I feel like we're on the right path. Thank you. The project also aligns with the government's commitment to expanding solar PV systems in off-grid areas, because they have this program called the Hinterland Electrification Program. And so we'll be contributing to that, as well as contributing, of course, to Sustainable Goal 7, affordable and clean energy for all. This intervention will also include, of course, capacity building components, offering training in like assessment, design, operation, and maintenance of off-grid solar projects in remote areas. That way we'll be able to replicate or scale up as needed. So to date for this project, we've conducted at least one mission in January again of this year, engaging with the national focal point, with our key counterparts, including the Guyana Energy Agency, and of course the Waramuri community, and other key stakeholders within the community as well. We've also conducted some site visits during this mission to allow us to gain a better visual perspective of the site, of the area, of like what might be needed and so on in terms of procurement, how we can move and so on, on the ground, because we're not there. So we'll obviously be able to, we need to know exactly how we'd actually design, how we move to implement the project. So currently we are working on defining the technical scope of the project, as well as finalizing the project proposal, as well as budget. Now, at the regional level, right, well, it's more multi-country than regional, because it's for OECS countries, and those are the 6 OECS countries: Antigua and Barbuda, Dominica, Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. That's all right. So at this level, through Euroclima Caribbean support, GIZ is conducting, like I said before, a PV system impact and hosting capacity study. So this study is a technical analysis that evaluates the effects of integrating PV systems into existing grids. So it will assess how solar generation would impact key parameters such as the stability, power quality, voltage fluctuations, and also the grid's capacity to accommodate new generation or new input. And so we can ensure that any sort of interconnectivity or interconnections that we have with PV systems would be safe, but also efficient, right? So importantly, like in this study, it not only looks at like the distribution grid on its own, but the entire energy generation system. And the results of this study can be used by utilities, because we'll be working with the utilities of these 6 countries, which would be 7 utilities in all, because there are 2 in St. Kitts and Nevis, 1 for St. Kitts, 1 for Nevis, right? So these utilities would be able to use the results of this study to better understand the amount of DPV, or distributed photovoltaic systems, that the existing electrical distribution system can reliably support, right? So like how much can actually be added to the existing grid. So for the participating OECS member states, this would provide like very valuable insight, we're hoping, into PV capacity limits and enable them to be able to better manage their energy transition in a more strategic and systematic way. So the key objectives basically of this system is, 1, to evaluate the current energy infrastructure and make sure that we can obtain a general view of the energy markets within each country that's involved in this particular study. Establish realistic data-based PV limits for the country's power grids, develop actionable recommendations, and the keyword here is actionable, recommendations for interconnection and requirements for the PV distribution generation systems, to organize and deliver capacity building and training for the stakeholders so that they would be able to replicate the methodology that's being used for this study for future needs and future energy analyses. We need to also assess the impact of PV integration on conventional power plants and identify any necessary measures to increase flexibility as well as efficiency and sustainability without any compromising of the reliability of the existing grid. And of course, we need to analyze and propose, business models for the utilities, because we need to be able to attract private investment and so on to our renewable energy, or to be able to help us with our renewable energy transition. So this initiative also aligns with the Global Gateway Investment Agenda that Luca will be speaking on in terms of climate and energy portfolio investments in solar, wind, geothermal, and green hydrogen technology. And I think it's very important for us to note that for this project, there will be a report that's done for each of the countries. So there'll be 6 reports, right? So for example, like I mentioned before, we found the intervention that we're doing with St. Lucia. We want to do a draft policy paper. So for St. Lucia, the outcome of this study will actually serve as the foundation for us, like a zero draft paper for the development of their national draft policy on microgrids, which I mentioned earlier. In developing any sort of projects and so on that we have under the Euroclima program, we always want to ensure that the projects are aligned to any national and regional priorities and can also complement existing initiatives, right? Because that's how you get, like, coordination, that's how you get synergies, that's how you get bang for your buck, right? So for both countries, for example, St. Lucia and Guyana, the projects are also aligned to their targets that are set in the nationally determined contributions, in their national energy policies, legislations, and so on, and any sort of commitments that they've made internationally as well as regionally. The projects are also aligned to regional priorities, such as the soon-to-be-developed OECS Sustainable Energy Roadmap 2020-2025, which just, when was it, last month, was endorsed by the ministers, the Council of Ministers for Energy on OECS. So, and of course, we are aligned to what we want to achieve with regards to the Eastern Caribbean Solar Challenge initiative. We prioritize any sort of close collaborations and so on that we need to have with national counterparts, because national counterparts are key. They possess, like, invaluable local knowledge and a deep understanding of the direction that they want to pursue. Moreover, it is these counterparts that are already working within the sector, which means that they are in the best positions to ensure synergies, synchronicities, coherence, policy coherence, and so on with ongoing projects. Of course, sustainability is also a key focus in our projects, which is why capacity building is a key component, as well as community engagement. And I feel like I preach into choir now when I say that, because of all the interventions that you have made so far. Right? But we want to ensure that the communities have a sense of stewardship as well in the project outputs, because it's in their community, it's supposed to be owned by them. That's how we can ensure sustainability, to make sure that they can also take care of it. So at all levels, the community needs to be engaged. And considering that we are working towards energy transition in the region, we also want to make sure that the methodologies and so on that we use are replicable as well as scalable, so that other countries would be able to use us as an example, these countries that we're doing as an example, to apply the same methodologies, the same technologies and so on, but within their national context. So with this approach, we really hope that we can strengthen strategic energy planning and institutional implementation capacity, contribute to a more sustainable and resilient energy future, of course, in the region. And through these sort of interventions, we're really hoping that, that we can ensure that, we can make them broader, bigger, replicable. Otherwise, that's the point. I think there are quite a few similarities and so on with Light Up Belize that we can learn from, right? Such as how Light Up Belize has bolstered technical and institutional capabilities with capacity building. I like the sort of coordination and so on that you have been able to create with the projects that you have done. And I also saw a video with regards to women in renewable energy. And as a WIRE mentor alum myself, I was pleased to learn about that, that collaboration. So the work that you've been doing is very inspired work and inspiring work, and I'm appreciative of you sharing. So also thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. I totally agree with you that capacity building is a key component of these initiatives. And taking you back to Mr. Kelly's presentation, where he asserted that we in Belize have established that collaboration and we've benefited well from the capacity building opportunities through the Light of Belize project, that we are now able to extend ourselves to our counterparts here in the region to maximize their efforts with their implementation. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, a big round of applause to our 6 presenters. With that, I now call for us to move into the question and answer segment. So now I take the opportunity to invite the following persons to come join me on stage to participate in the panel discussion, please. Mr. Zay, Mr. Dion Kelly, Mr. Deshaun Garbut, Mr. Darvin Roberts, Mr. Gunul, and Ms. Thomas. Please join us up front. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where we require your active participation. I told you at the beginning when we started today's session that you are key stakeholders to achieve the goals that we set forth today when we journeyed to Barbados to engage with you. We want to be able to understand what it is that our stakeholders are doing, what opportunities exist, and how we can progress and develop with our deployment for achieving universal access to electricity in Belize. So with that, I'm going to ask you that you come forward and use this mic, speak into this mic. We are live streaming the event, and to facilitate the multimedia, we would like for you to come forward with your questions, please. Okay. Not all at once, please.
Hello, yeah, good afternoon. So my name is Unai Arrieta. I work with TTA in Barcelona. We work with Energy Access. We've worked in Belize. I wanted to bring an idea from an ongoing project in Suriname. We've been working with the IDB and the public utility, so it's a pretty similar case to Belize. And as a new approach, we are designing mini-grids, but opening beyond. So not only looking at the electricity service provision, but also telecommunications, water treatment, and productive uses of energy. All as a whole in an integrated project. Do you foresee that evolution to come also in the Belize projects as a sort of bundling different services which are required by the communities in an integrated way, instead of having them siloed in separate projects, and thus getting the synergies and having them under a single project perspective. So having not only electricity provision, but telecommunications, water treatment, and productive uses of energy. Thank you.
I guess that's a policy question indeed. And so the answer there is definitely yes. We have started. I think what I missed in my presentation, I think I had that when you're doing your initiative in terms of providing the microgrid service to the village, you connect houses and community spaces. In those community spaces, there is the water pumping system. So definitely, transitioning from using diesel fuel to using the power from the microgrid. This definitely has been what we have been doing in the past microgrid systems, and we'll continue doing that. In terms of telecom, it has been a serious challenge because these areas, they're mountainous, so there's not a clear line of sight to provide that level of service with telecoms. But we have engaged them, and I believe the last village that we did, Corazon Creek, which we inaugurated in 2024, we invited both of the telecommunication company, both the national and the private company, to go on site. I believe one of them went on site and did an analysis. I know through the FPIC process, the village had asked the telecom company to just look at that process and see how they would source land. I know in the future, ideally what we'd want to do is that, because under FPIC, what you need to do, you need to sign something called a consent agreement with the village. And so what we pretty much ask is for the amount of space we believe the solar system might need and a bit more in terms of expansion. But going forward, we will be looking at the possibility of asking the village that we'd want a space for a telecom tower as well. So that is something that we're looking at. I know under other projects within the government, particularly with UNICEF, they have looked at that's my chain of thought. The productive uses. We have done that as well under the EU project, whereby there were NGOs who provided solar PV system for a bakery and a meat cutting facility. So it's something that we have done, but we just need to institutionalize it more.
CARICOM Development Fund. I was curious about your experiences with demand-side management in remote villages that are now being exposed to higher rates of electrification, and what some of your lessons were from trying to, for instance, sort of encourage energy conservation and efficiency principles and integrating that sort of mindset within villagers or community residents now that they've come into a place where they can access energy more readily and may therefore want to step into a level of usage or consumption that is sort of unprecedented. Thank you.
Hi. Well, like I said, with the projects that we've been doing, we've only just started. But in St. Lucia, for example, we are hoping that with our capacity building, there will also be some communication as well as energy efficiency and energy literacy sort of programs, right? Because we want to make sure that, like I said, the systems that we're putting in place can actually last, and they would not last very long if we not treat them with care. And treating them with care means to also treat them in an energy efficient manner.
I think for access solutions, efficiency is central to the discussion because it should be rather than a holistic approach to defining the demand instead of, okay, this is the mini grid, this is the solution that I built, and you have to live with it. So just give you an example from the health sector. What we are doing is to looking into not only simple electrification solution for a healthcare clinic, but looking into efficiency in the building design, efficiency in the equipment and appliances used, looking into IT needs, because there are now many of the health support is provided, health services are provided remotely. And then coming up with an appropriate technical solution that is corresponding to this overall demand that is defined in an efficient way. That's why efficiency is extremely important and central to this discussion.
good afternoon, everyone. My question was, well, posed to everybody. And I know one day presenter mentioned about expanding the ground to suppliers. And we know efficiency is the input and output of the whole product itself. So the question would relate to how much of youth involvement in the local content for each and every project from you guys.
Okay, that's a very good question, and I would also want to know if you don't answer that too in terms of how you engage with the villagers, especially youth, in terms of managing the systems.
So, from the utility point of view, as I mentioned in my presentation, we are using the hybrid approach, which involves the community and the utility to maintain these systems. And we usually find that it's the younger generation that are interested for training, right? So we go into these villages and we say that we would like to train individuals to help maintain the system. And usually it's the younger, the youths, I would say, that are currently going to probably high school. They know how to read and write. Those are the ones we usually encourage to get involved in these training, because then they could take that knowledge and pass it on as they grow up, right? So that is one way from the utility perspective, how we involve the youths.
Hi, I would like to take off my MC hat quickly and put on the energy officer hat to share that also through the Light Up Belize project, we were able to invoke awareness through youth. One of the initiatives that we did in collaboration with the project was to develop a series of 3 handbooks that spoke to the different components of the mini-grid systems. Those books are on display outside, and it's in the villages, they're remote, and you find that the children are the ones that are educated. And so we find them as a vessel to transfer this information home. So they take the information to their parents to teach them about the system, to teach them about the concept of energy efficiency, so that they can maintain the grid and ensure that they don't overload. So that's one way we have tried to include the youth as well in that regard. Anyone else?
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you very much for your insightful presentations. I'm Elizabeth Bullock de Freitas, Manager for Energy Solutions at Carolec. Mr. Garbett, I think, yes, you mentioned in your presentation that the tariff rates for the utility is actually lower than the LCOE for the mini-grids. Based on the approaches that you've already taken, have you identified any significant decreases in the LCOE? And if not, what other approaches do you intend to take? Thanks.
So, very good question. That is one of our main challenges right now at the utility. So, what initially we realized that the systems with the smaller battery capacity, that is where the levelized cost of electricity is the most. So what we're doing with future projects is that we are optimizing these systems to have adequate battery capacity, which in turn lower the levelized cost of electricity from the mini-grid significantly, but not significantly enough to be lower or as low as what the utility is currently charging per kilowatt hours. Next step forward would be is that's one of the main point why these systems for right now would have to come from probably grant funding, because or any other financial solution, because it is hard from the utility to go and invest in these systems knowing that the levelized cost that these systems produces is less than what we charge our customer, and we have one tariff rate. right? So we encourage for right now that having the utility not invest in those types of investment, then the gap is closed a bit, but not as much, right? The only way that gap could close, we run some analysis, is that it would have to be just a full battery and solar capacity without the generator, and then we would be able to match that of the utility. But then, of course, that system is going to be quite expensive, right? So we need to just try to strike a balance as for right now.
I would like to add that the electricity rate right now, the cost of power, more or less, the total for the country is around 25 cents Belize dollars. So that's half in US dollars. And then the value added of delivery is around 15 cents Belize. What happens in these cases where we have mini grids that are assets to the utility is that the customers that are connected to the mini grids are still BL customers, the utilities customers. And because the rates are global, then it doesn't matter that they're getting power from the microgrid. They still pay the same rate as any person, any customer in Belize. So therefore, it's kind of everybody is helping out to stabilize the rates. Otherwise, it would be very expensive to get powered from the microgrid. So that's one of the approaches that currently we have in Belize. Everybody plays a role to subsidize the other parts of the population that would otherwise would need to pay higher rates.
Mr. Roberts, while I have you there with the mic, I have a question for you. In integrating mini-grids within our energy sector, what regulatory challenges have we experienced, and how has the PUC strategized to address them?
The PUC needs to issue a license, and the license is issued to the owner. So one of the challenges that we have currently, and other countries that are implementing microgrids, is this question is, who is the owner? The owner would need to get a license from the Public Utilities Commission for the generation. And then the only license organization, entity in Belize is the utility. They are the ones that would distribute, sell energy. So the challenge there is who owns the asset. Especially if you get a funding agency through the government, then that asset somehow needs to be passed on to some other entity. It could be government-owned that would manage the system, or it would need to pass as the asset to the utility, which in that case it would be something like a contributed capital of the utility, and in those cases there won't be a rate of return on that, because those are not the investment of the utility per se. So that's one of the challenges, ownership, because it needs to be maintained also. Right. And services for delivery has to be the same across. If I get connected to a microgrid and my meter or whatever, a fuse blows and I need power back, whatever amount of time I need to get my power back, it's the same, or should be the same elsewhere.
Thank you. I have another question for Mr. Zay. Sorry, Mr. Zay, my apologies. How can our developing nations access technical assistance from the European Union, and how can they contribute to the sustainability of mini-grids?
Well, hello. Thank you for the question. The European Union today, they were given several examples, and what underlies the overall objective is, first of all, to contribute to the development of developing nations, and at the same time, there is a kind of string attached, which is to protect our planet. Hence, it's just not about to give energy and what relates, including technical assistance at different stages, but also sustainable energy, in a sense that we all know, we are all quite well aware of the impact of climate change in our lives, and particularly here in the Caribbean, with the small islands, developing states being very threatened by natural hazards, Belize included with hurricanes. So there are different types of schemes where the European Union contributes to the financing of these operations. I mean, traditionally, we give grants, and that's the case of the project that was coordinated today. But now, and I believe that Luca Trinchieri is going to talk about that, we want to multiply the effect of grants by investments that should be bankable by themselves, and that would allow to realize substantially bigger operations that what you can do just with grants. There are limits for what is possible to be done. So in terms of the technical assistance that we have received through this project comprises, it was mentioned, several activities, being the mini-grids one of the biggest. But we also have a component for electromobility in Belize, where we have supplied a number of electric buses for city travel and now intercity. And there were also smaller grants that were given specifically to provide solar access to NGOs or to institutions that would have a relevant impact in their communities. They all mention the case of a bakery, the case of a shop, a meat shop, that thanks to the solar panels was able to connect a freezer, and that had an economic impact. Well, all these activities, they are interlinked, and for that it contributed substantially to have the late-up technical assistance, because it helped us to collate, to put together the different bits and pieces of the puzzle, and to have overall a coherent approach. I'm actually sad that LATAP, the project is coming to an end soon, but hopefully we will be able to put similar operations in the future in Belize and I mean in many other nations. And I would confirm that the assistance is very relevant for the work that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zay. Similarly for you, Mr. Gunul, what type of innovative financial mechanisms exist that can help us to sustain and maximize the expansion of mini-grids in our developing nations?
I think I tried to elaborate on it in my presentation because many of the examples that we have reviewed through this guidebook, they very much rely on grants. And how we can, because grants, there's so much you can do, and to be able to achieve scale, you need to bring in those viable financial mechanisms and implement them depending on the market context. There are several mechanisms. Obviously, whether you can use public and international grants that you might that might become available to catalyze private investments into the sector. I mean, this is one important function of public funding, to be able to mobilize greater amounts of private investments in the sector, that you can achieve scale. Obviously, I mean, in Belize, the scale is, the required scale for achieving last mile is much smaller. There are certain cases that definitely it will require public funding to achieve the last mile. But I think part of it can be mobilized through private sector involvement or other mechanisms to be able to achieve the universal access in the country.
Thank you. I turn to you once more, ladies and gentlemen. Does anyone else have any burning questions? No? Okay. Then I want to say thank you, lady and gents, for your time, for your insight. We are truly grateful. Help me to give them a round of applause, please. Okay, now we move on to wrapping up our session for today. And for that, I call on Mr. Luca Trinchieri, who is the team leader of the EU delegation to the Caribbean. He oversees climate, disaster risk, energy, and Green Deal initiatives in the Caribbean. He has extensive experience in multilateral diplomacy and sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Mr. Luca, please.
Thank you very much. And again, first of all, congratulations for this event, but even more and most importantly for the progress and the success that we've been made aware of during the last 3 hours. And I have to say that it gives me a special satisfaction to be here where I live now in Barbados, but when this project was starting, I was in fact working for the European Union in Brussels, and I was a desk for Belize. And I remember having seen the proposal at the time and being involved in the very early stages of this project, and also in some of the initial obstacles that it had experienced, not specifically the microgrids components, but in general the broader program. So it's very good to see how extended progress this has had, and as it has mentioned already, after the presentations from the Belizean colleagues, there's a lot of lessons that can be learned. Surely that was one of the main objectives of bringing this closure to a broader platform and share this with other actors. It's been certainly useful for us from the EU side as well, and the European Union family with colleagues like Kimi from GIZ, because as I hope it's been also a message that has reached through the day. From the European Union side, we have renewable energy as one of the priorities for the region in the Caribbean, emerging from the broader framework we now operate in, which is Global Gateway. It's the strategy that the European Union has globally to promote transformational infrastructure development across the globe, with the ambition not to come only with the limited capacity from the European Union public sector, but also with the variety of expertise, knowledge, technology that the European Union broader family can bring in. And I'm talking about the private sector, I'm talking about the industry, I'm talking about financing institutions. That's the spirit of the Global Gateway. That's the way we work now in the region and elsewhere. Learning from experiences like yours in Belize is certainly useful in the replication of similar experiences. You've heard plans we have in St. Lucia, in Guyana, the broader grid assessment that we're doing for the OSCS countries. But I could go quite a long list on energy actions that we intend to have. There's a lot to learn. It's important to learn from experiences, especially when those experiences are relatable within the region, in similar contexts when it comes to energy markets, prices, and so on. So I really hope that this can become a starting point for more microgrid experiences in Belize and in the region. And from the European Union side, the intention is certainly to accompany these initiatives with a more coherent offer. And when I'm saying that, I mean ensuring that when we support processes in expanding renewable energy, we don't stop with the provision of some financial support, as it might have been in the past, but we try to actively and proactively collect the capacity we have within the European Union to accompany these processes, and establishing and facilitating peer-to-peer experiences, bringing European expertise and technology. And I think the presence also from TTA here that has been involved in this project specifically shows that even this project, which started before the Global Gateway, was actually already incorporating this spirit and this approach. So I think it's very, very positive. Thank you again for the excellent experience you've shared, and I hope that you will enjoy the next 2 days of the exciting conference. We will be all involved. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Luca. Ladies and gentlemen, our discussions today have been very enriching. We've covered a lot of topics: energy access, policy, regulation, limitations, pre- and post-implementation, financing opportunities. To summarize it, Belize's intent on achieving universal access to electricity by 2030, the goal we set forward, and we're going to achieve it with the collaboration between our stakeholders, nationally, regionally, and internationally. And we are grateful for you today. We are grateful for your time and your participation. And we welcome you to join us in a cocktail mixer that is scheduled to be held right outside behind those doors, where we want to further enhance and strengthen our collaborations and actually form new partnerships. So thank you for today. Before we leave, I would just like to ask you kindly to all join me on stage for a group photo, please, and ask that the presenters, the 6 presenters, sit as they were before. Please and thank you.